The future is on display in Surprise, Arizona. First-round draft picks and highly touted prospects galore will take the field and make fans and front offices drool over the talent heading up the pipeline to the big leagues. It's the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game coming up next on MLB Network. And welcome to Surprise Stadium in Surprise, Arizona for the annual Fall Stars game presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Some of the best and brightest young prospects in minor league baseball will be on display here tonight as the best in the East Division take on the best in the West Division. And with that, we welcome you inside the broadcast booth, Paul Severino and Joe McGrain. MLB Network proud to be here over the next couple of weeks to bounce around the league just a little bit. But tonight, we'll see some of the best players in minor league baseball who very realistically can be contributing at the next level soon.
Well, you're right. And I think for the most part, Paulie, you're going to see a lot of incredibly talented first-round players, a lot of tools. And this is really virtually viewed as the finishing school of some of the top talent in baseball. We go back into the years past and see a long line of successful players. Jacoby Ellsbury right off the top, fresh off a World Championship with the Boston Red Sox. Of course, Bryce Harper, Mike Trout, Andrew McCutchen, some absolute studs. And these guys that we're talking about tonight, the stars of today, are going to be the stars of tomorrow. So remember these names now here tonight.
No doubt about it. And one of the names that's on the tip of everybody's tongue is Kris Bryant. This guy has already, in the last couple of weeks, torn up the Fall League.
Well, when I was talking about guys being finished products, a lot of development still necessary for some, but this is a guy who is going to make a pretty quick impact for the Chicago Cubs. An impact bat, tremendous power, already very good knowledge of the strike zone. Big fella at 6'5", and of course with that tremendous power.
And the #1 prospect in all of baseball is here as well. Excited to see Byron Buxton.
Well, when you talk about 5-tool players, I think oftentimes that gets thrown around sometimes a little too loosely. Not in the case of Byron Buxton. Can beat you 5 different ways. Tremendous speed. Also very high baseball IQ, and not surprising, coming from the Twins organization.
So Bryant and Buxton are 2 of the 23 top 100 prospects, according to MLB.com, that are here in the Arizona Fall League, including 32 former first-round selections that we'll see as well, 4 first-round picks from this past June draft, and 63 minor league all-stars from the 2013 season at various levels of the minors. So we've got an awful lot to talk about, awful lot to break down. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, lineups and first pitch from Surprise next. Welcome back to Surprise. Paul Severino and Joe McGrain. So what exactly makes up the Arizona Fall League? Here are the player eligibility rules. 35 players per team and 20 pitchers on each squad. Each major league organization sends 7 players. The players are at AAA and AA by August 15th. Those are the guys that are eligible, and no players with more than 1 year of active or 2 years total of major league service as of August 31st are eligible. And as we have heard, talking with different people around the league and different people that have watched this league, this year kind of a younger crop of players. We actually see 4 19-year-olds are on the roster for this game, and 3 of which in the starting lineup. So a younger league than we've seen in years past.
A younger league, and you know, it used to be when there were more time over the course of a player's development that they would not be big league ready till 23, sometimes 24 years of age. But I don't know, simple math, Paul, tells me that they're getting better younger.
Seems that way for sure. And again, some of the top prospects will be on display here tonight for the Fall Stars game. And tonight's starting lineup is presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Here's the East Division starting lineup. James Ramsey is in left. He was a vote-in by Bowman. Brian Goodwin, center field. Kris Bryant, third base. C.J. Cron is at first. Taylor Lindsay is at second base. Stephen Piscotty is the DH. Jorge Soler is in right field. Peter O'Brien behind the plate. And Addison Russell, one of those 19-year-olds, is at shortstop for the East squad. And the pitcher that they will face is Alex Meyer, a member of the Minnesota Twins organization, playing for the Glendale Desert Dogs here in the Arizona Fall League.
Paul, he finished at New Brighton, the AA affiliate for the Minnesota Twins. Missed some time, pitched just 78 innings
this year, but when he did, it was pretty good. Very high velocity fastball, 92 to 97 miles an hour, hard knuckle curveball, and with that a slider and a changeup, and when you put them all together, pretty much frontline stuff. So this is a guy who just needs some reps and plenty of arm strength, listed at 6 feet 9 inches, although that may be a little generous, but nonetheless great downhill angle.
Yeah, tall drink of water, no doubt about it. Here's a look at the West defense. Delino DeShields is in left field. Byron Buxton, as we mentioned before, is in center field, and Bonifacio is in right. Moran, Seager, Betts, and Nicholas third to first. Austin Hedges behind the plate catching Alex Minor. There's a good look at Delino DeShields, one of the many players in this league and in this game with some major league bloodlines. Of course, his father, Delino DeShields, a longtime major leaguer as well. We are set to go. The first pitch from Meyer is low for ball one, and James Ramsey quickly ahead in the count. 1 ball and no strikes. Ramsey playing for the Salt River Rafters here in the Arizona Fall League, member of the St. Louis Cardinals organization. He fouls that one back to even up the count at 1 ball and 1 strike. Closer look at his numbers, what he's doing so far here in the Fall League. More of a hitter's league, as we have seen. Sometimes the pitchers get a little tired this time of year, so the hitters get to boost up the numbers a bit, hitting an even 300 in the AFL as that one is fouled back.
Yeah, definitely great for the confidence, being able to take advantage of some of those pitchers, and much has been made the last couple of years about the Cardinal way and their philosophy, at least when it comes to hitting, more of a 2-strike approach, and thinking more about the middle of the field. You have some other organizations like the Oakland A's that want you to swing hard on every single pitch, and the Cardinals organization preaching more putting the ball in play, although that didn't work out well that time.
Not quite. A 2-3 put out to finish off the strikeout, and there is one away after 5 pitches from Meyer here in the first.
And I think that was more having to do with that hard knuckle curve that Meyer has. You see it kind of comes in with fastball tilt, almost coming down with that fastball type angle, and then the bottom absolutely falls out of it, getting Ramsey to commit on it. Anytime you're getting hitters swinging at that breaking ball in the dirt, you know that it has good late break.
Reached 98 miles an hour. One of those 5 pitches in the at bat. That brings up Brian Goodwin, playing for the Mesa Solar Sox and a member of the Washington Nationals organization. You see his numbers here in the Arizona Fall League. He's the #1 prospect in the Washington Nationals organization. And he hits this one into right field for a base hit. So a 1-out single, and Goodwin is aboard.
Boy, just a beautiful level swing, and the one thing that I could see there is look how direct the route is to the baseball. Not a lot of moving parts, no hitch in the swing. The hands and the bat just straight through to the ball. Pretty to watch.
Absolutely, and he is one of those guys. You look at different scouting reports, a top of the order type of catalyst. This guy here, Chris Bryant, a middle of the order kind of guy for sure, as he has already really taken this Arizona Fall League to task in the first couple of weeks of the league. Good to see him take batting practice and, of course, put on a show.
Just another one of those guys that is, as we were mentioning.
That's a close play at first, but Goodwin back. Wow.
We were mentioning off the top about Bryant that is pretty close to a finished product, and I think Bryant really feels that may have been out there, but he has that lead maximized.
Goodwin 2 for 3 in stolen base attempts here in the Arizona Fall League, as the 1-0 pitch to Bryant is low, 2-0.
The other thing you're going to see in these games in the Arizona Fall League, as so many tools on display from pitchers with fastballs in the mid-90s, guys who can run. You will see something that's a little bit more atypical from a major league game. As the guy gets on first, he's gonna run and try to show off those wheels.
He stays put on the 2-0 pitch, which is fouled back, and Chris Bryant, the #4 prospect in the Cubs organization. He was drafted by Toronto back in 2010, but did not sign. Now 2nd overall this past June to the Cubs.
Just a little follow-up what we said on the beginning about the stuff that Meyer has, and obviously looking at that scouting report, a lot to like. That Michael Wacha type build that is really pronounced with his down angle throwing.
And that's something that the Minnesota Twins haven't really had a lot of in years past, is that hard throwing pitcher that they've been able to develop. I remember we were out here last year, called games with Tom Verducci. Kyle Gibson was a guy. Obviously, he came up in the middle of the season for the Minnesota Twins this season. Maybe didn't put forth the greatest of numbers, but obviously one of those guys that the Twins will be building around, and they certainly hope the same here for Alex Meyer. 2-2 pitch. Goodwin goes. Here goes the throw, and he is out at second base. So a caught stealing, and we have heard a lot about the arm of Austin Hedges and just how quick a release and good footwork he has, and he gets himself another caught stealing.
Well, I was impressed with a lot of that there. The footwork, not an easy ball to throw on, a backup breaking ball, to where he was able to get that back foot on the ground and get the shoulders turned.
Bryant strikes out to end the inning, so Meyer works around that one-out walk with a little help from his catcher. We will see the Westfall Stars after the break. Welcome back. Tonight's starting lineup is presented by Bowman Cards. To take a look at the West Division lineup, Delano DeShields leads things off in left field. Tyler Naquin is the DH. Byron Buxton, the #1 prospect in minor league baseball, is in center field. Colin Moran is at third. Jorge Bonifacio, the brother of Emilio Bonifacio, is in right. Corey Seager, the brother of Kyle Seager, is at short. Austin Hedges behind the plate. We already saw him nab another base runner. Brett Nicholas is at first, and Mookie Betts is at second base. And that offense will face this pitcher, Aaron Sanchez, the #1 pitcher, the #1 prospect even in the Toronto Blue Jays organization.
Yes, we were talking about Alex Meyer and now Aaron Sanchez, a couple of tall right-handers who have big-time fastballs. You see the strikeouts to walk ratio. He'd like to clean that up a little bit. 75 against the 40 walks, but arm strength, what you can't teach, and it is 95 and above with good late life. Working on harnessing that, but a lot to work with.
Drafted 34th overall back in 2010 out of high school. He's the #20 prospect in all of baseball. As Delano DeShields Jr. steps in, you see the .283 batting average here for the Peoria Javelinas in the Arizona Fall League, and the first pitch from Sanchez is in there for a called strike. Working quickly, a ground ball to second base. DeShields hustles down the line, but he's thrown out by a step. Then there's one away. So we just saw the play of defense. Taylor Lindsay. Let's take a look at the rest of the East Division defense. Ramsey, Goodwin, and Soler left to right. Bryant, Russell, Lindsay, and Crone third to first on the infield. And Patrick O'Brien is behind the plate, catching Sanchez. This is going to be fun. Again, as we mentioned in the open, we'll be out here for the next couple of weeks. Games throughout the week as well. Next Saturday, Military Appreciation Night, and then we'll be back for the Arizona Fall League Championship game in a couple of weeks as Tyler Naquin takes a called strike. 360 so far for the Surprise Saguaros, the homestanding Surprise Saguaros, as it were, as they play here. A facility that's shared by the Kansas City Royals and Texas Rangers in the spring.
Just an absolute beautiful facility. And over the years, a handful of teams moving from what used to be long-standing bases in Florida out to Arizona. It's much easier in spring training, with the fields being a lot closer together.
Everything's separated by what, an hour or so max? It's a little different in Florida.
Yep.
3 hours and change to get from one spot to the other in some cases, as the fans continue to file in, as Naquin will go down swinging, and another 2-3 put out for the out.
You know, I was so busy talking about Sanchez and his ability to really rush it up there in the mid-90s and above, and he just showed a couple of very good breaking balls to Tyler Naquin. And the one thing that I guess really impresses a lot of people and scouts the first time that they see Sanchez is how easy and relaxed that delivery is, and produces that high velocity fastball. And right when I say that, he throws it just to the backstop. Am I that rusty already?
So that one is up and in to the #1 prospect in all of baseball, Byron Buxton, hitting just .233 here in the Arizona Fall League. But this guy has put together a terrific season, no doubt about it. The Midwest League MVP, also played in the Futures game earlier this summer at Citi Field. #1 overall prospect, and of course that trickles down to overall prospect for the Twins and overall #1 prospect of all outfielders as well.
Well, that is a very good report card. Electric stuff, tremendous tools, and chance to watch a couple of rounds of batting practice, and he's just so balanced at the plate. Now the good players, they really make it look easy, and you can see even his taking of pitches, just he seems to have very good pitch recognition and looks to be very balanced, and a guy that looks like he's been playing baseball for a lot longer than he has.
He is a youngster for sure, just 19 years old. Again, one of those 4 19-year-olds on these 2 rosters here, and one of the 3 that's in the starting lineup for these 2 sides as well. So he's aboard after the 2-out walk, and that'll bring up Colin Moran.
It's gonna be a strike.
And a swing and a miss as Moran, the #4 prospect for the Miami Marlins, according to MLB.com. 6th overall pick out of North Carolina earlier this season.
Well, the Marlins over the last couple of years, Paul, have had a chance through trades to collect a lot of young talent.
Buxton is off. That one hit toward the left center field gap, and Buxton will go first to third, where he will hold up. So it'll be 1st and 3rd now, and 2 outs for Jorge Bonifacio. After the walk, it's a knock, and Sanchez in a bit of trouble.
Beautiful job of staying with that. Good approach. More middle to the field, staying inside the baseball. And this is one of the things right here that sometimes you tend to take for granted, is just watching a guy cut the bases and how effortlessly he was doing that. And from our vantage point up here in the booth, he was motoring.
Like a gazelle.
Absolutely.
Wow. I certainly do not have a scout's eye, but you can really appreciate that stride of Byron Buxton. So that brings up Jorge Bonifacio, the right fielder, playing for Peoria here in the Arizona Fall League, and as you can see, a member of the Kansas City Royals organization.
Yeah, those guys that can really run, where you really get an appreciation, is watching them go 1st to 3rd. Tight turn around second base and long effortless strides, but he was motoring.
Brian knocks it down, keeps it in front of him, and that will keep Buxton at 3rd. And John Hart, of course, a friend of ours over at MLB Network, always talks about that 2-base speed, being able to go from 1st to 3rd and 2nd to home.
Well, that was perfectly on display there, and just the expression, the look on his face, that is a very self-assured young man that is knowing of his tremendous talents.
So he's 90 feet away from the game's first run, but it'll be up to Bonifacio to try to get that run across. This one lined into right, and it hangs up just long enough for Jorge Soler to put it away for out number 3. So 2 men left aboard for the West, and it remains scoreless after 1. The AFL Fall Stars game is presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Get in on the ground floor and uncover greatness. Bowman Baseball Cards, who's next? Back here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino and Joe Magrane, as Meyer will face C.J. Cron, Taylor Lindsay, and Stephen Piscotty. 4, 5, 6 here in the top half of the 2nd inning.
Paul, you were mentioning the bloodlines before. C.J. Cron, his father Chris Cron, played in the major leagues and some time with the Angels, I believe. Pete O'Brien, the son of longtime catcher Charlie O'Brien, and of course Delino DeShields Jr.
Colin Moran, the nephew of B.J. Surhoff. So yeah, the bloodlines go across the board. We've seen a lot of that so far in this Arizona Fall League. Be a 1-1 pitch here to Crone, the number 2 prospect in the Angels organization. He takes low and away. 2 balls and 1 strike.
I'm prone to the breaking ball about lacking plate discipline. A lot of times when you see a scouting report like that, and obviously his biggest upside is with the lumber that he's got right there.
This one is hit in the air high and deep, but going back is Bonifacio a step or 2 onto the track, and he puts it away for out number 1.
And sometimes having those breaking pitches that come in on fastball tilt and really kind of affect the pitch recognition. And I think it's an oversimplification to say he has difficulty hitting the breaking ball, because there are different kinds. One that has like a hump in it that you can recognize a little sooner. Ones that come in like slurve or sliders that look more like fastballs. And just really learning to be able to pick up spin and the type of break that you're going to see from breaking pitches.
Nice little snapshot here of the potential future of the Angels as we go from the number 2 prospect in the organization to the number 3 prospect. Taylor Lindsey steps in, and the second pitch is popped up and over our heads. 0-2.
You know, I think one of the things that the younger players new to professional baseball, obviously making the adjustment with the wood bat, but more so that you're facing more pitchers with velocity, and both of these pitchers tonight we've already seen them north of 95 miles an hour. That being said, is they've got to get ready to hit a little sooner, meaning there can't be a lot of extraneous moving parts, and they need to have much more of a better direct route to the ball, a more economical route to the ball, and at the same time having a shorter swing and producing more power. Therein lies the challenge.
That one is hit on the ground to short, and Seager across the diamond for the 6-3 putout. So Meyer, of course, the number 3 prospect in the Twins organization, but he was not drafted by the Twins. Of course, he was drafted by the Washington Nationals, 23rd overall out of Kentucky in 2011, but came over to the Twins in that Denard Span trade. So again, one of those ways for the Twins to get what they haven't had a bunch of, and that's that power throwing type of pitcher.
Well, you look at their big league club, and
ooh, that one's hit in the air off the bat of Stephen Piscotty, high and deep left field, and Delino DeShields is off the wall. And Piscotty on the first pitch, a stand-up triple. Looked like DeShields had a tough time trying to track that one down, kind of circled it and meandered under it for a bit, and got his back up against the wall, and the ball wasn't that far behind.
Well, first off, ball has to be caught. Now, obviously at twilight here, it could be more difficult for him to track the ball with the lights not taking the full effect this time of day, but not his best route. Gets caught with the ball on the other side of his shoulder, and a little lack of awareness as to where he was with regard to the fence. I guess I could probably say just dropped it.
You could. Yeah, you could. Of course, that's not his normal position, as that one is knocked down by Austin Hedges, and it's now 2 balls and no strikes to Jorge Soler. Delino DeShields is moved over from center field to play left because of Byron Buxton. So Buxton kind of wins that little battle. It's going to be his position here in the All-Star game. So getting used to a different position, and with, again, as Joe mentioned, the lights, the twilight, the whole 9 yards, a difficult play, and a man on third now with 2 outs. And Soler in a hitter's count, misses just low, does Meyer.
Good pitch right there. That is one when, as a tall guy, you're working on that downhill angle. You do that, you execute it, you think it's right at the knees and don't get the call.
So Soler takes a 4-pitch walk, and the number 3 prospect in the Cubs organization will be on first with 2 outs. And again, back-to-back half innings where we see a first and third 2-out situation. The West unable to push across a run. We'll see if the East can have any better luck with Peter O'Brien stepping in.
Peter O'Brien, a catcher known more for his defensive skills, and I'll tell you, he had one of the best teachers in his dad, Charlie O'Brien, who really got a handful of extra years at the big league level with his ability to call a game and really just take a lot of pressure off the pitcher, and just incredibly adept not only in framing pitches but calling the game and really just kind of quarterbacking it.
Heard a lot about the Yankees catching prospects over the last few years. Obviously, Jesus Montero headed that list for a little while. He was traded to Seattle. They've got Gary Sanchez in the organization as well, and on that list goes. So Peter O'Brien hoping to crack through, perhaps help the big league club, as it's a 1st and 3rd situation here, and the count even up, 1 ball and 1 strike. That one's tap foul. 98 again from Meyer.
You saw that scouting report, and it wasn't like in glowing terms from his ability, to receive behind the plate, and I just can't fathom how that would be the case, given that his dad could flat out pick it back there.
Hit on the ground to short. They go the short way, 6-4 to end it. So 2 men left aboard here for the East, and that'll do it for the top half of the 2nd. When we come back, the West will have Corey Seager leading things off. When one season ends, another begins. Get a jump on the 2014 season with the latest buzz on trades, free agent signings, and news from around the league on TV's only baseball morning show, Hot Stove, with Matt Vasgersian and Harold Reynolds, weekdays at 9 Eastern on MLB Network. And they waste absolutely no time, as those guys are up bright and early on Monday morning to kickstart our off-season coverage. Of course, we'll be out here in the Arizona Fall League during the following week as well. So the baseball season never ends, is what I've noticed.
No, it never ends, and our good buddy Matt Vasgersian will start getting used to his 5:30 a.m. wake-up calls, and as a morning person, I can only imagine how chipper he will be.
Corey Seager leads off, and he did not check his swing, so it is no balls and 1 strike to the youngest player in the Arizona Fall League, Corey Seager. We're in April of 1994. I'm usually one of the younger guys around, and that makes me feel old.
Standing next to him, he is a big kid at 6'4", athletic, and at shortstop has that type of body that may trend towards third base.
That one is hit in the air, center field. Goodwin going back, he's under it, and he makes the catch for out number 1 here in the bottom half of the 2nd inning. That'll bring up Austin Hedges. So this will be Hedges' first at bat of the night, but we've already seen him on the defensive side of things as he threw out Brian Goodwin back in the 1st inning. He threw out 11 of 18 potential base stealers in the Arizona Fall League prior to that caught stealing, so making 12 of 19. Certainly known for his defense is Hedges, and he takes a strike on the outside part of the plate, and it's 0-1.
And Paul, it used to be that the saying was the quickest route to the major leagues is to be a good catcher, a good defensive catcher.
What a good defensive third baseman, Chris Bryant. Nicely done at the hot corner for out number 2. Can't say enough good things about Chris Bryant, but we've talked a lot about his offense, but making a nice play to his right there for out number 2.
Well, making it look easy, and we've talked about the tools of these players, just a plan of that back foot. Look at that throw. The arm strength, absolutely incredible. That is not a Texas leaguer being flipped over to first base. I mean, that is winging it.
Rhett Nicholas takes low and in, 1-0. And that's the thing. I would think that for Chris Bryant, being such a tall guy, having to reach down low is not the easiest thing. He's not that close to the ground.
Very athletic, and you saw that footwork just very well coordinated, and ball just jumped out of his hand like a howitzer. There's some arm strength.
Rhett Nicholas back for his 2nd straight year here in the Arizona Fall League. Played last year in the AFL as well. Drafted by Texas in the 6th round of the 2010 draft out of Missouri.
I came up, started my professional career back in 1985, and you know, all the infielders were little rugrats, you know, at second base, shortstop, third base, and now it's just this new breed of cat that's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". Chris Bryant over at third base, 6 feet 5 inches tall, and
Hot shot into right field for a base hit, a 2-out single for Nicholas, and the West Division has a runner aboard. Look at Jorge Soler as well, one of the top prospects in the Cubs organization. Signed that $30 million deal with the Chicago Cubs. Broke his leg in June this year, so he's one of those guys who's out here maybe to just get some more at bats. It's we talked about before, some pitchers to get more innings, some players to get some at bats if they're injured throughout the season.
And of course, one of those guys that when you're wanting to wish him good luck, or buena suerte in Spanish, don't say break a leg. He's already done that.
Well played, Joe. The 1-0 pitch to Mookie Betts is hit to left field. Going back is Ramsey, and he makes the catch toward the gap. And just like that, that's the third out of the second inning. We'll go to the top half of the third here in Surprise. Welcome back to the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game presented by Bowman Baseball Cards here in Surprise, Arizona. Paul Severino and Joe McGrain, joined now in the booth by Alex Novick, the assistant brand manager at Topps. We appreciate having you.
It's great to be here, guys. The Arizona Fall League has done a great job so far, just getting Bowman out there. Our partnership is really growing. We're really excited to have extended 3 years, and there's a lot of great things we can do. So happy to be here.
Glad to have you, as Addison Russell, James Ramsey, and Brian Goodwin will be the three scheduled batters here in the top half of the third inning. As that one is low, 1 ball and 1 strike. So obviously baseball cards have changed a little bit now. I see more of these cards that they've got game used bats and game used jerseys and stuff like that.
Yep. It's all about autographs now.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the autographs. Almost all of our boxes have 1 autograph in them. We have some products that actually have 5 autographs in them.
Wow.
And it's all the top prospects. We actually have 42 of the 54 players selected for this game we have autograph deals with. Bowman does. And about 40% of the Arizona Fall League players in general we have autograph deals with. So that's what our collectors want. That's what the value is.
And Addison Russell just grounded out, and I see that Addison Russell is the top card there on that pile that you got, right?
There you go. This is Addison Russell's autograph card.
Wow.
Bowman Platinum is the product.
How much does that go for?
Probably around $20 to $30.
Can I have it?
I don't know, man.
Wait a minute. You trying to turn that into currency?
No, I'm asking. I was going to give it to Greg Amsinger. I know he loves baseball cards. He would
that guy's
appreciate it.
obsessed.
Yeah.
That guy loves it.
Yeah, his office is largely made up of those cards.
Yeah, his whole desk is built with them.
I've been there.
James Ramsey is ahead in the count, 1 ball and no strikes. He shows bunt, drops it down the third base line. It looks like he's going to have himself a bunt single with 1 out here in the third.
Absolutely beautifully executed. Moran playing deep at third base, and you know, I talk about bunting being the lost art. Kept the barrel very level, did not sink down with the barrel, was able to stay on top of it, and very well done.
Bring up Brian Goodwin, who singled and was caught stealing in his first go around in the order. Another one of the gifts that you brought up was a Joe McGrain card from 1944, I believe. No?
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe.
Close.
He laughs now, but he won't be buying me dinner later. I know that. Goodwin takes outside.
You know, I remember in spring training at Topps, Cy Berger was he was the most popular guy in spring training because he used to come around and see all of us and hand us our Topps checks, and we would get our cards, and it's one of the biggest thrills. And
Hedges throws behind the runner, and back safely is Ramsey, but a close play.
Just thought that was just one of the biggest thrills, is that you knew you arrived when you saw a baseball card of yourself, and it was just a real cool thing. And I know the guys here must really enjoy that and that relationship you guys have with them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Bowman is, man. It's Bowman is the first time players will ever see themselves in a major league uniform on a baseball card after they get drafted or after they get signed. And typically, it's the most valuable card or most collectible card that they'll have throughout their whole career.
That's great.
Alex Novick joining us here in the booth. Paul Severino and Joe McGrain. 2-1 count here to Brian Goodwin with one out in the top half of the third. So are they all action shots on baseball cards nowadays? Because I know back in the day, some of them are just kind of standing there, or they're, I don't want to say, I don't know, staged is the right word, but how does that work?
We have a lot of action shots. We have our editors back in New York put a lot of time and a lot of effort into picking the best shots possible. You can't imagine how much time they spend on that, but you know, we have photo days every year in spring training where like every player on the roster just comes out there and poses for pictures. So we use a lot of those. It depends on the product, it depends on the type of card, the design, the theme. So we use all types of images.
I think the thing that was kind of, because we all remember those days, is that the photographers had to be very knowledgeable as well, because there was always a couple of us on the team that would try tomfoolery and hijinks, like to get photographed with a right-handed glove if you were a left-handed pitcher, or those type of.
Ramsey goes. I mean, why bother? Why bother with Austin Hedges?
Guy can throw.
Makes it 13 of 20 here in the Arizona Fall League. And a strike him out, throw him out, double play will end the inning. Alex Novick joining us here in the booth. We're coming back right after this. Back here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino and Joe McGrain. A new pitcher is in the ball game, and Kyle Crick of the San Francisco Giants organization will work as he takes over for Aaron Sanchez. 14 starts, a 3-1 record, and a 1.57 ERA at high A.
Just another one of those guys that can rush it up there. I'm just seeing with each passing pitcher a feeling of jealousy wash over me. All these guys throwing 95 miles an hour on just one day. I'd like to know what that was like.
Don't kid yourself, Joe. You were.
I'm just saying, it just seems like everybody and their brother is throwing 95 and north these days.
Top of the order due up here for the West. Delino DeShields, Tyler Naquin, and Byron Buxton. They'll get a good look at Kyle Crick, the #1 prospect in the San Francisco Giants organization. Drafted in the 49th round out of high school in 2011. But not pitching like a 49th round pick at all. He's the number 42 prospect overall in minor league baseball.
Well, that's the first thing that I noticed, that fluid delivery. You see it right off the top in the scouting report, and very, very good balance over the pitching rubber. I think sometimes people tend to get overly technical with their pitching mechanics, and I don't think you really ever take off as a pitcher until you can stop worrying about all the things that are going on the hill.
That one is going to hang up for Goodwin to put it away. So DeShields is retired, and he is 0 for 2. And there's one out.
Yeah, and to finish that thought is that you're not a slave to your delivery. You're watching what the hitter's doing. You're reading his bat, and you're making pitches according to that. You mentioned the #1 prospect with the San Francisco Giants. You know, Matt Cain does that about as well as anyone. Matt Cain has another one of those type of deliveries where it's not very high maintenance. It's easy for him to repeat. See, he's got that great knee lift, great balance over the pitching rubber. Not a lot of herky-jerky nuances in that delivery to where he should not be one of those guys that is in a constant battle with himself, with his pitching mechanics. Very simple mechanics, and with the consistency of that release point, it should do him wonders at the plate with better location, and he has very good late life on his pitches, and one of the parts of that scouting report as well shows that.
So he faces Naquin, who's 0 for 1 with a strikeout. He struck out against Aaron Sanchez in the first inning. Naquin in the air, left field. Going back is Ramsey, way back and over his head. And around second, heading toward third is Naquin. There might be a play. Now it's cut off, so Naquin is in there safely with a one-out triple.
Well, you make your triples a lot of times right out of the box, and that's one thing that Naquin was doing a beautiful job of. He wasn't cruising, seeing how far the ball was going to go. It just kept drifting, and you see him immediately put his head down and got on his horse, and he turned that into a triple. Looked like it was going to be a double. Everything right in front of him. Look at that extra gear And again, so important, not only just the speed, but the ability to be economical going around the bases. Tight turns and turning what looked like a double into a triple.
That speed, part of the reason why he's the number 5 prospect in the Indians organization. As Byron Buxton will take a look at the second pitch. Looks like a little cross up there between pitcher and catcher, and now 1 ball and 1 strike to Buxton.
Yeah, it looked like O'Brien, you know, almost caught that half with his hand and with his glove, like old school style.
And you wonder why the cross up as well, because usually you see that if there's a runner on second base.
Right.
Obviously not the case here.
You know, and some pitchers, and you know, Roger Clemens was one of the guys that comes to mind. He was always very suspicious that anywhere in the ballpark someone could be picking up his sign, so it didn't matter whether there was anyone on or a runner on second. He was very, you know, technical and constantly changing his sign sequencing.
Crick and O'Brien worked together quite a bit, obviously, both playing for the Scottsdale Scorpions here in the Arizona Fall League. Be a 2-2 pitch to Buxton, but Crick steps off.
You have a lot of these team names in the Arizona Fall League representing very menacing parts of this state, like the javelina, which is basically a wild pig, a scorpion you don't want to get stung by, and a saguaro cactus that you don't want to run into.
Right. Dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
Buxton fouls it back, and then there's the desert dog, the solar sock.
I've seen those up close, and I'm telling you, they are frightening creatures.
The old skunk pig.
Right?
Let's hit on the ground right through Chris Bryant and into left field. So Naquin will score the first run of the ball game. The West takes a 1-0 lead. So Bryant, who we saw an inning ago make a nice play to his right to get the out at first.
Ball was absolutely smoked, and a little short hop that he was expecting. You can see just the quick little reaction, half smirk on his face, and he was going, oh man, really? Knowing that fundamental about getting underneath the ball. That one skidded as opposed to giving him that little higher hop.
Good look at Bill Richardson, who we saw, the manager of the East, also manages the Mesa Solar Sox here in the Arizona Fall League. And Colin Moran, who is 1 for 1 with a knock, is down to the count. No balls and 1 strike. Moran, the number 71 prospect overall, as ranked by MLB.com, and the number 5 third baseman in terms of prospects, according to MLB.com. That one's inside. 1 ball and 1 strike. Again, we mentioned it before. Again, the bloodlines around the Arizona Fall League. Colin Moran, his brother, Brian Moran, saw him at the Under Armour game actually earlier this summer in Chicago. So he's working his way to hopefully a promising baseball career as well, as it looked as though Peter O'Brien getting the mitt fixed.
He's a grinder mentality, which probably means the Arizona Diamondbacks, as they have made up a large part of their club. Maybe Kevin Towers has his eye on Mr. Moran.
Have you seen this before, Joe? Where the looks like the catcher, and I'm only assuming here, is
O'Brien
warming up the mitt. So it's got to be a brand new mitt, I would think, right?
Yeah, what he did is he had a thumb guard inside the catcher's mitt, went back to the dugout, and either is trying it without it or switched it out, and just wanted to take a practice throw to make sure that he could still catch.
Can he throw?
Yes,
throw down
sir.
to second. Not in time as Buxton steals second. So Buxton moves into scoring position with the stolen base. And he's on second with 1 out.
Well, we've already seen the wheels of Buxton twice tonight, going from first to third and just outrunning the baseball there at second base. That was a pretty good catch and throw by O'Brien.
Buxton 2 for 3 in stolen base attempts coming into today in the Arizona Fall League, and a guy who had 55 stolen bases during his minor league season at A ball and high A as well.
Terry Ryan, the Mets, or not the Mets, the Twins GM in the ballpark today, has to like what he already has seen out of Brian Buxton tonight. Seen him go first to third, and the other thing that they're really looking at for Byron is barreling up and squaring up the baseball, even though that went for an error by Bryant. That ball was absolutely smoked down third base. So we've seen the bat, we've seen the wheels, and so far here in the early going, Byron Buxton has not disappointed.
Well, that error leading from Chris Bryant leading to the game's first run, and Jorge Bonifacio looking to add to it with a couple of runners aboard here and one out. And again, as we go through the night here, we'll try to figure out where these guys fit on the big league club, as Jonathan Mayo from MLB.com will join us for a few innings. Coming up in the fourth, a dive by Bryant and a nice play to keep it on the infield by Addison Russell. And I would imagine with the speed of Buxton, that probably saved another run.
Well, it does, and that's one thing that, especially with two outs and you have a runner in scoring position, great effort there by Bryant going to the hold. His infielders will tell each other, make sure you knock it down, do anything you can to knock it down to the guy on second base, and that was absolutely what was done. And you're right, Paul, saved a run.
So that'll bring up Corey Seager, the #2 prospect in the Dodgers organization, according to MLB.com, and he takes the ball inside. So bases are loaded here with one out in the bottom half of the third. The West already with a run home and a chance to do a bit more damage here. Low and in, 2-0.
It's something winning teams do, making that play like Addison Russell was able to make, keep that ball from going to the outfield and scoring a run. And now Crick having the opportunity of being able to roll up a ground ball and get out of this with just one run, being able to stay out of a big inning.
That one's in the dirt, rolls away, but not far enough from Peter O'Brien, and Buxton will hang out at third. So we've seen that a couple of times with Buxton 90 feet away, that O'Brien just kind of knocks the ball down and keeps it close enough to keep Buxton at third.
And Crick, knowing that he's going to be in there for a short time, I think sometimes the tendency for pitchers is, not to take a long view, but really let the shaft out, empty the bucket, so to speak, and really turn it loose. And as a result, you'll see a little bit more wildness, a little bit more velocity, but with that, a little being slightly out of control and having the wildness to where he's yanked a few pitches and that one up and away. Much better delivery there.
That will bring the count full now, 3 balls and 2 strikes. And I would think, obviously you're a great guy to ask, is a starting pitcher's mentality, as Crick is. This one is hit on the ground, a chopper to second. They get 1. They do not get 2. As Seager beats it out, a close play, and Buxton will score to make it a 2-0 lead for the West.
See, C.J. Cron at first base did the best that he could to try to cheat J.T. Snow style by going out and getting the ball, and watch him just come off the bag quickly to try to steal that bang bang play over at first base.
And with the way that ball was hit and the way that Seager was busting it out of the box, I don't think that Taylor Lindsay at second base had any other choice but to at least get the out at second.
Yeah, he was sniffing that RBI, man. He was busting it.
No doubt about it. So it is now a 2-0 lead, as we'll see Austin Hedges. And to finish my point quickly, was just a starting pitcher, his mentality is not to, obviously you want to go out there and throw up zeros all night long, but your mentality is, okay, if I give up a run or 2, let me settle in. And that obviously changes in a game or situation like this, where you may only work 1 inning and you give up 2 runs. It's not that big a deal.
Well, and you see there a breaking ball, and he's still kind of in overthrow mode, and obviously the #1 pitching prospect for the Giants, but still wanting to impress the the many scouts.
Russell goes the short way for out number 3, but 2 runs come across in the bottom half of the 3rd, and the West takes a 2-0 lead. The AFL Fall Stars game is presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Get in on the ground floor and uncover greatness. Bowman Baseball Cards. Who's next? We'll tell you who's next in the broadcast booth, and that would be Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com. Who's next on the mound? That is Eduardo Rodriguez as he takes over for Alex Meyer, who worked 3 innings to get a little bit of extra work. Paul Severino and Joe McGrain again joined by Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com. Jonathan, always a pleasure to see you.
Always good to be with you.
All right, so your job is to give us the lowdown on every player in this ballgame. Go.
All right, you guys go take a break, go get some food. I'll take it from here.
You see Rodriguez, 125 strikeouts and 145 innings pitched, and he will face the heart of the East order, Chris Bryant, C.J. Cron, and Taylor Lindsay here in the 4th. All right, we'll start with the easy one. Chris Bryant, worth the hype?
Absolutely, at least with the bat. You saw part of what he needs to work on if he wants to stay at 3rd, but at the end of the day, even if he ends up having to move to right field, which he played quite well during his junior season at San Diego, that's fine. I think whatever gets him his bat to the big leagues faster is what will work for the Chicago Cubs.
But definitely projects as a 30 and 100 type guy with that type of power.
I think so right now. I mean, coming out of high school, there was a lot of concern. He was a pretty good prospect back then about swing and miss to his game, and he's going to get some strikeouts along the way. There's no question. But he really tightened his approach. He spread himself out while working with their coaching staff there in his sophomore year. And it really helped him keep his hands still, and he started making more consistent contact while he still strikes out. I think he's going to walk a fair amount, and I think, as he's shown so far in his brief pro career, he knows how to hit. As long as fans know that he's going to strike out 140, 150 times a year. But Joe, I don't know about you, 140 strikeouts, as long as you get 30 and 100, you kind of live with it.
Right. Yeah, you can definitely tolerate that. I watch his hands and his route to the ball. Even though that one is popped up on the infield, and I was expecting a lot more movement, but it does look like that swing has tightened up a little bit.
So as Chris Bryant is retired for out number 1 here in the 4th, we'll welcome you back inside the broadcast booth. Paul Severino, as I've been joined all game by Joe McGrain, and right now by Jonathan Mayo. So again, this is one of those games that's you keep your eyes and your ears open. We've seen in years past, just 2 years ago, Bryce Harper and Mike Trout on the field. Next year they both win Rookie of the Year in the respective leagues. So if you're watching this game, jot some notes down.
That's good. I was wondering what happened to those guys.
Yeah,
I lost track of them after this game, so I wasn't really sure. But yeah, and it's every year. I think from last year's game, 23 guys played in the big leagues the next year. So it's not just an indicator of future big leaguers. It's an indicator of who's going to be up the following season. Now, this year's fall league, and I know you guys talked about it early on, is a little younger. A lot of guys who haven't played above A ball. So my guess is a lot of the players that that are playing in tonight's game, they'll make the big leagues, but it may not be next year. We may have to wait an additional year before they get there, but that's just the nature of the age of the players in this game.
Well, what about a guy like Byron Buxton? And he's already shown me a lot of impressive tools in this game alone. And Terry Ryan, who's in the ballpark tonight, has been a GM historically who has said that he's never thought about the clock or kept a player down. If he's ready, he's ready. And I guess, when is Byron Buxton going to be ready?
Right. It's interesting. I thought it was an interesting decision to send him here. This was a guy who, when he was drafted, he was unbelievably toolsy, but supposedly really raw and needed to learn how to play baseball. Well, clearly wrong about that. And he hit across 2 levels. This, I think, should afford him the ability at least to compete for a spot on their Double-A team to start next year. And then who knows? I mean, if he goes to the Eastern League and he rakes, then maybe you see him. Maybe you see him in Minnesota before the year is over. But I'm thinking more the beginning of 2015 when he gave him another full year of at-bats in the minor leagues, let him adjust to an upper level of pitching that he's not really faced. He's already shown the ability to make some adjustments here. His overall numbers aren't good, but he started to swing the bat a little bit better the last few games, and that's what he did when he first got to the Florida State League as well. So clearly his learning curve is shorter than most because he does seem to figure out what he needs to do to catch up to the level of competition.
Well, and scouts talk about a guy having the good face, and he is definitely one of those guys. What I mean by that is it just has a self-assuredness and a confidence. You can see the expression of Derek Jeter, the look in his eye, the look in Buxton's eyes. He has that what a scout would call the good face.
Yeah, and it's a quiet confidence. I mean, he's a very polite, quiet young man. Doesn't have a whole lot to say, but it's not because he doesn't want to spend the time with you. He's just, kind of the way he was raised. But when he's between the lines, you're absolutely right, Joe. He looks like he belongs. When he was at the Futures game, even though he was a little overmatched in his 2 at-bats there, it was just 2 at-bats for him. He realized that there's going to be a lot more. And even in high school, when he started playing on the Showcase Tour, and people wondered, well, the level of competition in his high school wasn't very good. Then he started playing better competition, and he just ratcheted up a few notches, and he seems to do that everywhere he goes.
So just to go back, a batter, C.J. Cron with the ground out, and then his teammate with the Mesa Solar Sox and teammate within the Angels organization, Taylor Lindsay, drew the walk. So now 2 outs here for Stephen Piscotty, who on the first pitch grounds to third. And Moran across the diamond for out number 3. Jonathan, you're sticking around for a bit, so hold your horses. We've got to take a quick break. Much more on Byron Buxton and the rest of the Fall Stars next. Weeknights on MLB Network. It's the show that's not afraid to question the rules of the game. Think baseball as Brian Keddy studies the science of building a winner on Clubhouse Confidential. Weeknights at 7:30 Eastern only on MLB Network, presented by the U.S. Army. Back here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino, Joe Magrane, and Jonathan Mayo from MLB.com. Cam Bedrosian is the new pitcher. You may recognize the name. Another one of those players with some bloodlines.
Yeah, the son of Steve Bedrosian, and I remember him coming out of high school, same build. Yeah, I think similar delivery. Originally there were hopes that perhaps he could start, although there were always concerns because there's some effort there. Get a look at his dad here on the mound.
Bedrock, as they used to call him, Cy Young Award winner in 1987. Kind of some controlled fury in that delivery. Great late action on his heater.
And he's even got the beard now.
Yeah, he looks just like him.
But he's a guy who had Tommy John surgery, and I think that may have ended the real chance of him being a starter. Anyway, there were questions. He didn't really have a changeup, but he's got a fastball, breaking ball, can throw pretty hard, and he really made the transition this year to bullpen work full time.
And with that scouting report saying big looping curve, is that a suggestion that he needs to tighten it up a little bit, or is it more of a description of his type of curve?
It's probably more of a description, but I mean, I don't know how many short relievers you've seen in the big leagues who throw slow curveballs.
That's true.
He'll face Brett Nicholas, Mookie Betts, and then the top of the order, Delino DeShields, here in the bottom half of the 4th, with the West up 4-0. Nicholas singled in his first at bat back in the 2nd inning.
It is interesting that he still uses a windup. So many relievers these days now, it's all stretch all the time. I guess it's the one little bit of starting that he's not let go of just yet.
Well, and I always felt pitching out of the windup is just a whoops.
Hit in the air, deep right field. Soler is back, and that one is out of here. So it's a leadoff home run for Brett Nicholas, and it's a 3-0 lead for the West.
Right into the wheelhouse right there.
The Rocky music playing and everything. Probably gets a little extra cheer again, as we mentioned before. Plays for the Surprise Saguaros, so the Surprise Saguaros home ballpark.
Well, and the title of that song was "Gonna Fly Now," and that's exactly what happened to that ball off the bat there of Nicholas.
That one straightens up Mookie Betts, who's 0 for 1.
But to finish that point about Bedrosian throwing out of the windup, I think a lot of pitchers figure that, you know, it's really a good tempo rhythm type thing, and I always felt that it was a good way to collect timing, rhythm, and where that delivery kind of is more of a dance step as opposed to just pitching out of a static stretch position. But you're right, Jonathan, so many relievers try to be very economical as possible with their delivery by mostly pitching out of the stretch.
Well, so often they're called upon to come into situations with runners on base, so they got to do it right away. So might as well. That last breaking ball he threw looked a little tighter than,
yes, it did.
The scouting report said. So, and listen, he's out here, you know, making up for innings that he's lost over the last couple of years, and he's probably, you know, benefited from being able to work with some other pitching coaches here and work on developing, you know, a tighter breaking ball to go along with that good fastball. Yeah, and I remember Greg Maddux telling me one time that when he was throwing on the side in between starts, and he was doing so much of it out of the stretch, and I said, you were throwing an awful lot out of the stretch, and he said, well, I'm going to have to make my most important pitches in the game out of the stretch. Why not? I thought that really made a whole lot of sense.
Be a full count pitch here to Mookie Betts, the second baseman tonight in the Red Sox organization. 3-2 pitch misses upstairs for the walk. So a home run and now a walk, and Bedrosian has himself in a bit of trouble here in the bottom half of the fourth inning. And we will use Mookie Betts as kind of the bridge to the next thing that I'm glad you're up here to kind of help us discuss. And obviously a good look there too, because that helps where I'm going, is the first baseman, C.J. Cron, and then the runner here is Mookie Betts. These two guys are blocked by some pretty talented ball players at the big league level. Obviously Dustin Pedroia, as Betts is off and running and he's in there without a throw, and then some guy named Albert Pujols plays first base for the Angels. So
I've heard of him.
Yeah. So the question is that for some of these guys, how are they blocked? Do they have a clear path to a big league career?
Well, I think as of right now, no. And, you know, and I think Cron is a little bit closer, although he didn't play particularly well while he was at the AA level, so you could always send him back there if he wanted to, although, you know, it's already his second full season out of college. Delino DeShields continues to work on his bunting game, which he knows will be a big part of who he is as a major leaguer.
Well, he's got the wheels, and I think, you know, for a while, based on metrics, a lot of people frowning against bunting, and I think a lot of ways has become kind of a lost art in the major leagues. And if you are a speed guy, and you know, if you can get a hit a week, or maybe even a couple of hits a week by bunting, it's something you have to work at.
Well, I think at the very least, you know, it makes the third baseman have to be a little more honest and play in, and then maybe you can poke some by him. And DeShields has some strength. He's not a little tiny guy that you worry, well, is he going to hit? Like Billy Hamilton, people worry about, well, will he hit? Delino DeShields has some physicality to him, so there's less concern. So I think that's just going to be one aspect of his game. He does have the ability to yank the ball down the line at times.
And that will lead to a run, the wild pitch. So Bedrosian's given up a couple of runs in this inning. One on the home run and one there on the wild pitch, and just like that, it's 4-0.
You want to get back to Mookie Betts and C.J. Cron. You know, Cron was in AA. He was okay. So you take another look, and Bedrosian has struggled with command since he began his pro career, and then of course the Tommy John surgery set him back some. You know, Betts has a little ways to go. You know, it's one of those cross that bridge when you get to it kind of thing. He can't really play shortstop. I don't think he's the kind of guy that you say, oh, he's going to be a utility guy. He's really a second baseman. Maybe you could move him out to the outfield. He's an interesting guy because his tools are not like individually, they don't jump out at you. They're solid average across the board, but he really knows how to play the game. It sort of sounds like the guy who's playing second base in Boston currently.
Right.
So he has a chance to be a regular major leaguer, but you know, it's good to have depth because you know, that's the Red Sox have had some success not only bringing guys up from their farm system, but then using those pieces to trade for the big league pieces so they can continue to compete in that ultra competitive AL East.
3-2 pitch, and Tyler Naquin strikes out swinging, so there are two away. And that's interesting because as the World Series was going on, I was hosting MLB Tonight, had a chance to talk with Nick Cafardo, with one of our MLB Network correspondents about the Boston Red Sox, and he just, as we were looking toward the 2014 season, threw out the notion of the Red Sox looking at trying to get Giancarlo Stanton from the Marlins. And of course, I followed up and asked him, do they have the pieces to do it? And that goes back to the depth of the Red Sox organization in the minor leagues as we take a look at Byron Buxton as he takes the ball.
And of course, with all due respect to Mookie Betts,
yeah,
he's not going to get Giancarlo Stanton to Boston.
No, but again, it just goes to the depth that they have.
They could put together a package of prospects, and they have some high-level prospects that if they're willing to part with them, they could bring in a guy like that. Yes, and that is the work that Theo Epstein and company started, and Ben Sherrington has continued to do, and it's what Theo's trying to do in Chicago now with the Cubs and building up their farm system. We've seen some of the top prospects in their organization are in the game here today. So, yeah, you worry about it when the time comes. Betts still hasn't played at the upper levels of the minors.
Right.
He's relatively young, so you can wait. Unless he's used as a trade piece, you can wait to see where you put him and what you do with him for a little while.
Buxton in the air toward right center field. Speaking of Cubs and their farm system, Jorge Soler puts that one away for out number 3, but 2 more runs come across in the inning. One on the home run by Brett Nicholas and the other on a wild pitch. It's 4-0 after 4. The 2013 season had it all, and MLB Network honors the best of the best with all the award winners. See who takes home the hardware beginning Monday at 8 Eastern with the Players' Choice Awards presented by MLB 14, the show exclusively on MLB Network. Back here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino, Joe Magrane, and Jonathan Mayo from MLB.com joining us for a few innings here as there's a new pitcher on the mound for the West, a team with a 4-0 lead, and it's Ken Giles. Played at High A Clearwater for the Philadelphia Phillies in their organization. 2-2 with a 6.31 ERA.
Another one of those guys that can rush it up there north of 95 miles an hour. You talk sometimes about how a guy could throw a soft 95 and someone would throw a hard 95, meaning that there's not a tremendous amount of deception, and you would think that 95 miles an hour on its own merits would be tough to hit, but some guys are easier to see, easier to pick up, even though they are throwing at high velocity. And I think one thing that the Phillies would like to see is Giles missing more bats.
Missing it at first base was Brett Nicholas, but you could see why. That was a hot shot off the bat of Jorge Soler, so a leadoff single, and that'll bring up Peter O'Brien, followed by Addison Russell here in the top half of the 5th.
Boy, that was scalded.
I think if Nicholas catches that, they might as well put his name on the MVP award right there.
Yeah.
Nicholas, of course, adding the offense with the solo home run in the bottom half of the 4th, and now he'll hold Soler on. So give us the lowdown on Jorge Soler. Obviously one of those guys that we've heard a lot about, and for some people, myself included, getting a chance to see him with our own eyes.
Well, the first thing that I saw him the first week of the Fall League, when you see him in person, he is a monster of a young man. He's physically mature, and it was hard to evaluate him because he missed so much time because of injury. I think he needs to get some more at bats, and I think he needs to mature a little bit. Those are the 2 biggest issues. But as we saw there, the ball comes off his bat differently than it does against a lot of people. A lot of strength and power, and the kind of guy who should be able to play a very good right field in the future. Good arm, fairly athletic. I think it's a question of him showing up and being ready to play every day.
Well, in the scouting report there about maturity and adapting, is that more of a cultural thing, coming over to a new country and having a good support system of friends and people he trusts, or just growing up, or all of the above?
Probably all of the above. I try to remind myself with some of these guys, when I was 21, 22, it's not like I had my act together, and you're right. And coming to a new country, and there definitely does seem to be a larger cultural disparity, even how they play the game on the field with how they play in Cuba to expectations here that sometimes are probably unfair on the game's here part. And then, he wasn't even going to big cities. He was playing in the Florida State League. He was going to go to the Southern League. He's not exactly going to big cities necessarily. So there's a lot of transitions that have to go on, and sometimes the expectations for them to get it right away are probably unfair.
Yeah, it's beyond just inside the foul lines.
Absolutely.
Scored himself a 9-year, $30 million contract with the Chicago Cubs. 2-2 pitch to O'Brien. Did he hold up? Yes, he did. Count runs full 3-2.
According to Pitch FX, that ball was 100 miles an hour coming off his bat. You know,
Seemed like it was about 200
yes.
coming off the bat, too.
Oh, it was smoked.
Yeah, he absolutely tattooed. And listen, he has all the physical abilities to be what the Cubs hoped when they gave him that contract. And it'll be interesting to see next year if he's fully healthy and he comes in. Obviously, people saw what Yasiel Puig did for the Dodgers, and now there's going to be an expectation that Soler, who signed, he's and Cespedes and Puig all signed within not that far away from each other. Cespedes and Puig are already in the big leagues. Soler is not there yet, but next year, if things start coming together, he could be.
And that's what's interesting, I think, is one of these talking points as we head into the hot stove season. And obviously, the way that the game has changed a bit as Addison Russell steps in with a man on and one out here in the fifth, is that now with free agency and just listing off a few guys, Verlander, King Felix, Cole Hamels, guys like that don't even reach free agency. Sure, you get the Jacoby Ellsbury's and the Robinson Canoes and stuff like that, but we're not seeing a long list of free agents anymore. So more and more teams are going to get these Cuba defectors or even off to Japan. We're hearing a lot about Masahiro Tanaka this offseason.
Well, he lost the game now.
Highly sought after. Oh, he lost one?
He lost,
well,
forget it.
Forget it. He
30-1 or whatever.
Won't be seeing any cash. But it seems as though that's kind of where the game is going and where these organizations are going to get that talent that's not available on the free agent market.
Right. And obviously there's still the draft and guys, especially college draftees, are moving fairly quickly. Even some of the high school guys are moving faster than usual, and then teams are locking them up for a little cost certainty. So you'll see some of that. A guy like Corey Seager was a high school draft, and he got promoted up a level. So maybe he starts in the California League, but he could start moving more quickly, just like a guy like Buxton can.
I guess what's the simple answer for why that is? You have a lot of younger players this year, and is it a lot to do with travel baseball and AAU and a lot of kids getting more reps at an earlier age to where they are advancing at younger ages?
I think that's really shortened the curve. It used to be the gap between even college baseball and the pro game was so vast that even the college guys needed a certain amount of time in the minors, and that doesn't seem to be the case. And even with some of the high school guys, as we see Addison Russell strike out there, I'm a big Addison Russell fan as a high school guy who went right to the California League for his first full season because they're playing year-round, depending on where they're from. And then over the summer, there are all these showcases where they're facing top talent. I think it used to be you'd find a guy in high school, wow, he looked really good, but he's never faced a guy who's thrown 90 miles an hour. Right. They've all faced 94, 95 already. So they're already way ahead of where high schoolers were maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that would have more to do with it is facing top flight arms, top flight stuff, and I think that would really kind of hasten the development.
James Ramsey takes upstairs. It's 2 balls and no strikes. He's the number 10 prospect in the Cardinals organization, but we'll spin it to a guy who's not in this league right now, who's the number 1 prospect in the Cardinals organization, and that's Oscar Taveras. Heard a lot about him in the spring, and we got banged up during the summer. But is next year the year for Oscar Taveras to be in the bigs?
Assuming he stays healthy, yeah, I think there's no question. And I think that had he not gotten hurt, you might have seen him at some point if there was a need. They weren't going to bring him up and not have him play every day. But I think there are probably some people both within and outside the Cardinals organization who felt if he were healthy, he probably could have been a more productive option in center than, say, John Jay.
Right.
And that might still be the case. Now, with Carlos Beltran's impending free agency, where is he going to go if he's gone? A lot of people think Taveras ends up in right field anyway. You can move him there now. So, I think if he comes to spring training and has a huge spring, they certainly look at it. But you could also say, well, give him a little bit more time in the minors because he missed so much time. He's still so young that, let's say for whatever reason, he scuffles and has to spend an entire year in AAA. I think that means he'd be 23 in 2015. So they don't have to rush, but I have a feeling that his bat is going to find a place in that lineup at some point next year.
And that's the fun part of being the armchair GM in the winter, is that, let's say Carlos Beltran does decide to go someplace else. We saw what Matt Adams can bring to that Cardinals lineup. We know about Allen Craig for sure. So if there's a way to get them both in the lineup, you'd figure maybe that means Craig's in the outfield. So, you know, one of those questions that obviously John Mozeliak and his staff will have to answer as Ramsey draws the 2-out walk.
It's a good problem to have, you know. And then you have a guy like Stephen Piscotty, who's in this game, who's moved to right field. So there's going to be a little bit, and he made it to Double-A in his first full season. There's going to be a logjam at some point, but you could probably ask 30 general managers, and all of them would love to have the issues that the Cardinals do in terms of having too much talent, and it's enabled them to let guys get more time in the minors than maybe some other teams have. So when those guys get to the big leagues, even though they're still young, they're ready. You know, Shelby Miller spent actually a good amount of time at the upper levels of the minors. So when he stepped into the rotation this year, he was really ready to go, even though he's still so incredibly young.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the strengths, obviously, of the St. Louis Cardinals. Their postseason roster had 20 of the 25 guys on the roster that had come from the Cardinals organization, which is as good of a commercial for, you know, what your organization is about as anything.
Ryan Goodwin ahead in the count, 2 balls and no strikes. Again, the #1 prospect with the Washington Nationals, and he hits this one in the air, left side of the infield, and Seager's there for out number 3. So the East puts a couple of runners aboard, but leaves them both, and still trails it 4-0 as we go to the bottom half of the 5th. MLB Network's got the offseason covered. Wake up to the morning buzz on Hot Stove, then watch Intentional Talk, Clubhouse Confidential, and MLB Tonight in prime time. Track all the action all offseason long, weeknights on MLB Network. Back here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino, Joe Magrane, joined now by Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com, as we have been for the past couple of innings, and we will see a new pitcher on the mound, somebody that, Jonathan, you were telling me about before the ball game that you like a lot, Marcus Stroman.
Yeah, I really do, and it's funny because I've been trying to see him pitch since he was at Duke. There's actually summer he was pitching for USA Baseball, and he didn't pitch when I was down there during their Prospect Classic that they had a couple years back, and then that summer I think he gave up 1 hit and struck out 18 and walked 1. I mean, we put up video game numbers, and I finally got to see him pitch yesterday or the day before, and it was just an inning, and it was nothing spectacular, but I just it's a lot of arm and a not so big of a package, and it's kind of fun to watch.
Well, and I think that's the amazing thing, because so many scouts look for comparisons. Who does this guy remind you of? Or you could say maybe Tom Gordon. Right. He's 5'9". He's right-handed and 5'9", and you just don't see guys like that very often.
Yeah, he's 5'9" with 4 pitches that he can throw for strikes, and 3 are above average or better. And because of his size, people will always question whether he's a starter or a reliever.
Right.
The Blue Jays, he started all year. He had success in Double-A, and they have told him that he's going to start. He's just pitching in relief here in the Fall League, mostly to monitor his innings. I think also just to keep that in his back pocket, because he has had success coming in late in games, and he's got the go right at you kind of attitude that you like for a late inning guy. But he's always out there with a chip on his shoulder, because people for years have been telling him he's too small to do what he's been doing. And I think the Blue Jays are doing it right. Let him start until he shows he can't succeed doing it.
And the Blue Jays are a team that obviously in the future, the near future, as R.A. Dickey gets a year older, it doesn't sound like Josh Johnson's coming back. This is a team that's going to need some pitching if they're going to compete in obviously a very tough American League East. The 1-2 pitch here to Colin Moran on the ground. Will find a hole on the right side for the base hit. So Moran gets his second hit of the night. And walk sandwiched in there as well. So he's been on base all 3 trips to the plate. A lot to like about Colin Moran, too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's a nice little ACC matchup here. Duke versus University of North Carolina. But, yeah, I mean, Moran was drafted as the top college advanced bat, and he can really hit. And the question is, how much power will there be? Will he fit the mold of a third baseman when all is said and done? But even though he's scuffled a little bit out here, I think what he's shown tonight is exactly why the Marlins drafted him. He just knows how to swing the bat.
Jorge Bonifacio takes low and away, and obviously Moran was quite busy this June as he got drafted this past June. We've seen a number of guys that are playing in this game and in this league that were drafted back in June. Obviously, Chris Bryant, Colin Moran, Michael Lorenzen, and Knebel, who we may see at some point tonight as well.
Yeah, a couple of pitchers. I mean, Lorenzen to me is one of the most interesting ones because he played center field for Cal State Fullerton and closed for them. And initially was, when he was drafted, they were going to kind of let him do both. They were letting him take batting practice his first summer, but he threw so well he ended up in the California League by the end of the year. And he's a smart kid, he realized, and so he's pitching. And it's interesting, he's starting out here. They're going to develop him as a starter for now, but I think that's mostly to let him get some innings because he hasn't pitched a lot. But he told me at the beginning of the fall league season that he finally he owns his first pair of cleats for pitchers, with the
spikes and the pitching toe.
With the pitching toe. He never had a pitching toe because, when he was at Fullerton, he'd be playing center field and then boom, he's coming up to close. So he just wore whatever he had on. So he is adjusting to life as a pitcher only.
Well, I think there's also something to be said of having a young pitcher's arm. Oftentimes that guys come up and they enter into a pro ball and they've been pitching since little league, since high school, and they've been the #1 guy on their staff, and they've thrown a lot of pitches, a lot of breaking pitches, and over the long course of time. And there's something to be said that these guys that come from playing other positions and have what I would call a young pitching arm that has not had the early wear and tear, which obviously hurts a lot of guys.
And I think another thing, and we see it with Stroman, and that's what's helped him in terms of overcoming the fact that he's not big, is, and I don't think it gets talked about enough, is athleticism on the mound.
Right.
And if a guy is a good athlete, then he's got a better chance to repeat his delivery. That's helped Stroman considerably. Even though he's not big, he's strong and he's a very good athlete. And Lorenzen was a toolsy guy out in center field who could run. He's very athletic as well, and I think that's going to serve him well. As he continues to make that transition to being a full-time pitcher.
Well, and I can see this with Stroman, even though he is 5'9", you can see the athletic ability, and although the plate's bouncing around a little bit on him now, you can definitely see that he has very good body control and just has the poise and the look of a guy that is going to be a successful pitcher.
And I think he has every belief that he will be helping Toronto during the 2014 season.
A strikeout there of Corey Seager for out #1 in the inning. So obviously with Stroman and the starting pitcher tonight, Aaron Sanchez, we've seen 2 of the top 3 prospects in the Blue Jays organization. Mentioned before, probably Josh Johnson. Doesn't sound like he's coming back. R.A. Dickey's a year older. Mark Burley's a year older. So you think they're going to be relying on these younger arms in the next year, 2 or 3?
They traded a lot of them away, to Miami. So Noah Syndergaard was in that organization. He started the Futures game. So they loaded up on high-end pitching over a couple of drafts, especially the 2011 draft. That Sanchez is from, and they used some of that to bring in some of those more established guys that you just mentioned. And Sanchez is a little ways away. He only pitched in the Midwest League and only threw 80 some odd innings or whatever he ended up with because of injuries. So they're going to not rush him. But you saw a little bit of the pure stuff that once he gets some time on the mound, I think he has a chance to start moving a little more quickly.
Be a 1-1 pitch here to Austin Hedges, and we've already seen his defense at work tonight as he's thrown out 2 base runners tonight, 13 of 20 in his time here in the Arizona Fall League as he pops this one up. Foul territory right side and just out of the reach of Taylor Lindsay. So Hedges, it seems to me, obviously we've only seen him for 5 innings here on MLB Network, but it seems as though defense is perhaps his calling card.
Without question. He came, it's not often that you have a high school catcher that people are talking about the glove first, and the question has always been how much is he going to hit. And he's not bad at the plate, but he doesn't have that power profile that you like to see from a catcher. His numbers have been modest, but there are people who think he could catch in the big leagues right now. He has all the skills, and it's not just plus arm. You're going to see Jorge Alfaro a little bit later on, and he's got a gun. But the rest of his receiving, is still a work in progress. He's going to be a catcher, no doubt about it. Hedges does everything well. He already has a feel for calling a game. His hands are good. His release is just insane. He may not have the strongest arm of catchers in the minor leagues, but as you saw With those 2 base runners he threw out, he just gets rid of the ball so quickly that on the first one, even when the throw's a little bit high, he got down there so fast that there was more than enough time for Addison Russell to catch, and not Addison Russell, I had them trade teams, but to have their shortstop get the tag down in plenty of time.
Back-to-back strikeouts here for Stroman as Hedges is retired. That's going to bring up Brett Nicholas, who homered in his last at-bat. Joe, you know, we hear it, we throw the term around a lot in the course of a summer, but he calls a good game. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it really is, and there's an art to it. You know, I really believe that pitching is not a science, it is an art, and the same thing with catching. And it's someone having the ability to read what the hitter is doing and to call pitches according to what the talent of the pitcher is as well. And we're going to break, and I could talk all day about this.
And you will through the break. When we come back, it'll be the 6th inning here on MLB Network. Hey, baseball fans, make sure you visit MLB.com/AFL auction to bid on some amazing game-used jerseys and caps from some of today's top MLB prospects. Future stars such as Byron Buxton, Addison Russell, Austin Hedges, Albert Almora, and Jorge Soler are included. It's happening now at MLB.com/AFL auction. Back here at Surprise Stadium, a good look at Byron Buxton. Paul Severino, Joe McGrain joined in the booth as we have been the last couple innings with Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com. A good look at Colin Moran, who is now out of the ball game. We've reached that point in the game where everybody gets a bit confused, as wholesale changes in an all-star game means that we have no idea what's going on. Kivas Sampson is also in the ball game as well, on in relief here, but he started 27 games in his 28 appearances, a 3.5 ERA at AA and AAA. Member of the San Diego Padres organization.
Yeah, he's kind of snuck up on people a little bit. He was a high school draftee who started a little slowly and then actually had some success this year. He still struggles a little bit with his command. You can see the walk rate right there, but is on the cusp of being able to help out. I don't know that he's ever going to be the top of the rotation kind of guy that they once hoped he might be. But you know, the fall league could be a good opportunity for him to use as a springboard into getting some time in San Diego in 2014.
Yeah, and it is a great luxury to be able to have a 4th or a 5th starter that has the type of stuff that he can get over the plate and get you innings.
And being efficient like that would probably help him as well. It's Chris Bryant. He's retired on 1 pitch, the line drive to right field, and there is one away here in the top half of the 6th inning.
It's Yorman Rodriguez now in right field.
Thanks for helping me out.
I'm here for you.
Yeah, Yorman Rodriguez is in right field. Who's in left field? Anybody know?
Steven Romero.
Steven Romero. There you go.
I like this game.
Garen Cicchini. There's a good look at Steven Romero out in left field. Garen Cicchini, we got a chance to see him. That is at third base. Wayne Semien is at short. Here's Cicchini. Semien's at short. Eddie Rosario is at second. And I think, Jorge Alfaro is behind the plate. So I think that's everybody,
You've
right?
caught up. Buxton and
now we're
is still in the game.
Okay.
As is Brett Nicholas.
Yeah. This is a hard shot into center field for a 1-out single off the bat of C.J. Cron. Yeah, Joe's worked with me enough to know it doesn't take much to knock me off kilter a little bit. 7-8 defensive changes.
That's doesn't often happen in a big league game, but you know, maybe a backfield split squad game.
Yeah.
Cron had as good a batting practice round as anybody. He and Bryant were kind of going toe to toe, and I think Cron actually may have won the round. Hit a ball off the light tower, hit a ball almost out of the park.
So true light tower power.
Yes,
yeah.
at least in batting practice.
Yeah.
All right, but in case of that at bat, as we look at Devon Travis, who's entered the game, nice little player from the Tigers system. Right back up the middle, good piece of hitting by Cron.
He hits in the spot that was Taylor Lindsay, who was 0 for 1 with a walk. So Devon Travis, as you can see, a member of the Tigers organization, right now ahead in the count, 2 balls and no strikes.
He really jumped on the map this year. Travis did with a bit of a breakout season in the minor leagues. Runs pretty well, has a little more extra base pop than you would think, given his size.
Number 12 prospect in the Tigers organization.
Well, that's really a scouting report that says that they believe that that bat is eventually going to come together, and there's another one of those things we see often: undersized but talented. I think that's just another way of saying short.
It's a
right?
fancy way to
that's
say
what it is.
short.
Yeah, because if he was undersized and not talented, I don't think we'd be talking about him right now.
Right.
But he has a chance to be, you know, and another sort of phrase that's used a lot is, you know, offensive-minded second baseman.
This one's popped up on the infield, and Rosario will put that one away for out number 2.
That's what Rosario is.
Right.
He's an offensive-minded second baseman.
Right.
Now, is that always a way to say that the defense has come up short, or is that like a Robinson Cano is very good on offense? I don't know if he's necessarily an offensive.
He's an all around.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see these little buzzwords.
Dan Uggla was an offensive-minded second baseman.
Okay.
So that in those cases, yes, come up short. But these guys, they're still works in progress. You know, a guy like Rosario was an outfielder who they've moved to second, and then he continues to see some time in the outfield. So I think they're still trying to figure out where he fits in, and whether or not maybe he ends up being a guy who moves around a little bit. But I think they want to try to find some place for his bat.
So Kyle Parker is pinch hitting here for Stephen Piscotty, and he takes the ball low. And, you know, we've talked about it, guys transitioning from one position to the other, and Kyle Parker taking it to the extreme from quarterback to baseball. Obviously, the quarterback at Clemson for a few years.
You're following the Todd Helton path of professional baseball, even the same organization. And I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think he's the only college player to hit 20 homers and throw 20 touchdown passes in the same school year. And he's still learning the sort of nuances of hitting. And then he was originally an outfielder. Now he's playing first base, so he's learning how to play first base as well. But there is a lot of power in the bat in the Rockies field that it's all going to come together, and he's going to be that kind of run-producing first baseman that every team tries to find.
67 home runs in 3 pro seasons for Kyle Parker.
Well, obviously playing that leadership position of quarterback and the responsibilities of knowing the playbook cold and being able to make adjustments, you would think would serve him well. You saw the last part of that scouting report, a tendency to chase.
And he does for the strikeout and out number 3. So that'll do it here in the top half of the 6th, 4-0 West. Welcome back to the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino, Joe McGrain, and for the next half inning, Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com as well. The West has a 4-0 lead. They scored 2 innings, 2 runs, I should say, back in the 3rd, and 2 more in the 4th. A home run for Brett Nicholas, the big blow. A solo home run, but another run coming across on an error on a wild pitch. So a new pitcher in the ball game now for the East, I should say, is Mike Montgomery, involved in a trade last year for James Shields. He's obviously found a new home with the Tampa Bay Rays organization.
Yeah, and you may remember Mike Montgomery came up in the Royals organization with a lot of promise. Left-hander with a good fastball and a big breaking curveball, and really has just had some difficulty putting it together and really just kind of coordinating that delivery to where he can consistently locate. You look at each one of the pitches by themselves, and you can see just the inconsistency in that release point there. That putting it together really has been the challenge for him. And I was saying individually, there's a lot to like about the pitches that he has, but still one of those guys that is battling the consistency of having a repeatable delivery.
Yeah, the pure stuff is still basically good. When he was still with Kansas City, he had a little bit of an elbow problem,
right,
that didn't require surgery, and he's never really been quite the same. And I don't know if it's just he's afraid to just let it fly, although fastball velocity it has come back, although maybe not as consistently. As we take a look at his delivery here,
there's like a little hitch in the giddy up there. He's throwing over a stiff front leg, and that used to be like a no-no mechanically, but if you're able to get over the top of it and it's not a recoil action, it's it's okay. Don Sutton was probably a great example of that, a guy who threw off a pronounced stiff front leg but was able to get over the top of it and not recoil.
Eddie Rosario taps too short, and he will beat that one out. So an infield single as he hits a little tapper to the new shortstop, Alan Hansen,
who clearly didn't get the scouting report that Eddie Rosario can run. He was taking his time on that play, and Rosario, to his credit, running hard right out of the box and beat it easily.
That was Rosario's first at bat of the night as he took over for Mookie Betts at second base on the defensive side of things. So he's aboard with nobody out here in the bottom half of the sixth, and the West will try to tack onto their lead as Steven Romero steps up with a man aboard and nobody out. He skies one to deep right field, going back, looking up, and that one's going to get out for a 2-run home run. So welcome to the game, Steven Romero.
Boy, that ball was just overpowered. That almost had the look like a left-handed pull hitter to have that type of opposite field pop. I mean, there's some leverage in that swing apparently.
And Albert Almora, who's in now, just ran out of real estate. So the 2-run shot, now a 6-0 lead for the West.
The Mariners have liked Romero quite a bit. A year ago was our minor league player of the year. Struggled a little bit more this year, but can move around, play a couple different positions, and as we see there, can swing the bat a little bit.
You see opposite field power, and normally is a lot to get excited about just based on where you are as far as your approach as a hitter. That was impressive.
Stephen Romero, the number 7 prospect in the Mariners organization, a Mariners club that's got a lot of youngsters that we have obviously some have seen at the major league level. Other guys on the pitching side of things maybe have had a taste. See Taijuan Walker being one of those guys, but it seems as though, and maybe we've been hearing this the last couple of years, that the future is bright in Seattle.
I think they had to kind of hit the reset button, right? Because they had some success and then they slid back a little bit. But they'll have Mike Zunino for a full year behind the plate, and I think that will help. I think you saw some of those young pitchers come up at different times of the year. I fully expect Taijuan Walker to be in that rotation from the beginning of the season. And then it just remains to be seen if he can find some consistency. If a guy like James Paxton can find some consistency. They have some talent in their system in the upper levels that should be able to help them out in 2014.
Tyler Naquin will draw the walk, and he's aboard, and again already 2 runs home off the left arm here of Mike Montgomery. So a 6-0 lead here for the West as they've scored 2 runs in the 3rd, 4th, and now in the 6th.
And just watching Montgomery, I'm seeing arm strength, but real inconsistent with the release point. Not like one of those bad days type inconsistency, but it looks like he is fighting himself with regard to that release point.
Byron Buxton line drive, base hit into center field. And there will be 2 men aboard and still nobody out here in the 6th.
Yeah, I think when Montgomery had success early in his career, one, he had a 95-mile-an-hour fastball that he could throw by guys, and he was down in the zone, and everything pretty much this inning has been up.
Yes, and you think about a young left-hander who can throw 95 and has good spin on his breaking ball, and just you think of being one of those classic frontline starters, and the Royals definitely had those designs, and it's just been a bit sidetracked, and the Rays will now have that opportunity, who have had a good history in developing players, or pitchers rather, at the minor league level. Will get that chance.
It's a chance to face Garen Cicchini right here, as this will be his first at bat as he takes over, or took over, for Colin Moran over at third. See what he's done so far here in the Arizona Fall League. 5 ribbies, 11 walks, and a .229 average.
Following a very strong 2013 season, he saw a good amount of time in Double-A after starting the year in the Carolina League.
A guy with a million accolades along the way as well, Cicchini. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my notes here. I almost ran out of space. Just all the accolades that he's acquired along the way. Down at the count here, no balls and 2 strikes.
Maybe he writes his own bio.
It might be. Yeah. Did you get that from Wikipedia?
No, I think I looked everywhere else but that.
Can flat out hit.
Yep. The power hasn't come yet. He's not your prototypical third baseman. The question is, will he have enough power to do it? He runs very well. Not like in terms of pure speed, but good instincts. He stole 20 some odd bases.
But he comes up empty for out number 1. So here, because I don't want it to go to waste, he was the number 7 prospect, number 2, 82 overall rather by MLB.com, and number 8 at third base. So the Red Sox obviously have something cooking, but that goes back to the point we were making before, was the depth of their farm system and the talent that they've got.
And they could give him another full year because they can move some things around depending on what they want to do above him. And that's a real credit to their scouting staff, because Garrett Cicchini did not play a game of baseball in his senior year of high school. He blew out his knee. But the area scout knew him so well and had seen him play so much that they drafted him. And then they gave him an above slot deal to sign rather than to go on to college. And at least so far, futures game, one of the better third base prospects in baseball. It looked like a good move.
Yoman Rodriguez grounds into the 6-4-3 double play, but the damage done. A 2-run home run from Stephan Romero makes this a 6-0 ball game. That's where it stands right now, heading to the 7th here on MLB Network. The AFL Fall Stars game is presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Get in on the ground floor and uncover greatness. Bowman Baseball Cards. Who's next? Paul Severino and Joe Magrane back here in the broadcast booth. A special thanks to Jonathan Mayo, who spent 3 innings with us, trying to give a little extra background information on some of the guys that we've been fortunate enough to see here in the Fall Stars game. Right now it's the West with a 6-0 lead. 2 runs in the 3rd, 2 more in the 4th, and 2 more in the 6th. And they've got that 6-run edge as they hand things over to Chris Bassett, who started 26 games at a couple of levels of the minor leagues in 2013.
Yeah, Jonathan, he knows all these guys cold. He was helping us with all the changes, not having to refer to.
No, he wasn't fumbling over his notes like I was. That's for sure.
The definite shell answer man.
Albert Almora will lead things off. You saw him on defense in the last inning, kind of look up as he ran out of real estate on the Stephan Romero home run. He takes outside. 1 ball and no strikes from Bassett. Almora, the number 2 prospect in the Cubs organization, drafted last year, 2012, 6th overall out of high school in Miami. Flies this one to right, and in fair territory, Yoman Rodriguez puts it away for out number 1. Gonna bring up Adrian Nieto, who came in on defense in the last half inning, so he'll get his first at bat as he takes over for Peter O'Brien, who was 0 for 2.
Well, that's the thing, Paul, that's just amazing to me now that we have seen each guy that's towing the slab. There aren't any what we used to call cunny thumbers that were just flipping the breaking ball in and really relied on a lot of trickery and changing of speeds. And it just seems like everybody and their brother is throwing 95 miles an hour these days.
And I've heard the debate a lot. I don't know if it's a debate so much as it's just a question that's asked, but are the guns different? Are they registering a different mile per hour, or are these guys actually throwing hard?
Well, they are a little bit different. And see, there's a guy with a 92 mile an hour fastball where the scouting report says the stuff is average.
And that hits Nieto, so he'll take his base. A 1-out hit batsman has the East with a runner on.
And just to finish the sentence, I used to use what was called the ray gun, which measured the velocity where it was right in front of the plate, and the jugs, as it was known back then, and a couple of other different type of guns measure it out of the hand, and you're going to get those higher numbers, obviously, when you're measuring it right out of the right out of the hand, which is why scouts typically, there's the stalker is another one of those guns. Scouts, typically would be against a guy like Stroman that we had seen before, who's 5 feet 9 inches tall, that is releasing the ball further away from home plate, meaning that the ball's not going to be as hard by the time it gets to the dish, which is why they tend to really love the pitchers that's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and releasing the ball, throwing it down the hill like Michael Wacha with the Cardinals, and it's kind of what they look for, and releasing it closer to the plate.
So our first look at Alan Hansen, who took over at short earlier in the game. He's the number 3 prospect in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, according to MLB.com. He fires one toward the third base dugout, even up the count, 1 ball on 1 strike. Good look at the skipper there, Bill Richardson, also coaching third base, trying to get some offense together here and get back in this ball game with his East squad trailing 6-0.
Bill Richardson has an interesting story, and not really the typical path that a lot of guys that get into professional baseball as managers, coached in high school for 20 years before he got into professional baseball and managing, and that typically is not the arc of a guy that is managing in professional baseball.
No. Had a sporting goods store as well, and was still working with a team, and a scout saw the way that he was holding his workouts and said, hey, I want to give you a job. Ended up being a hitting coach, and here working in the Arizona Fall League. But he says, and it's the same across the board with the 6 guys who are skippers in this league, and the dozen or so guys that are also coaches in this league. After a long year of all the travel, of course the minor league travel too, which can be, it's not the first class flights and the charter flights and the beautiful hotels, a little bit different. So it's a long and tedious year as Hansen taps back, but it will move the runner in the scoring position. So it's a long year, but they're still excited to get here and help these young kids.
Well, you really have to love it, and very easy to see, and talking with him today, his passion and how much he really enjoys seeing these young kids progress. And of course, on the other side,
Gary Kendall along with Rich Gedman.
Rich Gedman, one of my old battery mates with the St. Louis Cardinals, and
the hitting coach for the Surprise Saguaros.
Spent most of his career catching, of course, with the Boston Red Sox, and gets to return back to his organization where he got his start.
Our first look at Mason Williams. Even in the Fall League, Red Sox and Yankees have to share the spotlight here. Rich Gedman of on that squad in 1986, and we got a chance to talk to him before the game and said it's a good time right now. Good time having those Red Sox ties. Obviously a few days removed from a World Series championship. The franchise that couldn't win one for 86 years has won 3 of the last 10. And interestingly, Rich Gedman, before he got back into affiliated baseball, spent a handful of seasons as Mason Williams with the base hit through the right side. He'll take a turnaround first. Here comes the throw, and here comes the run. It's the first run of the night as Nieto scores from second. And moving up to second is Mason Williams. It's now 6-1. Strong throw in right from Yorman Rodriguez, but just a bit high, and it leads to the first run for the East.
Well, it was so strong at the throw. I was watching it come in. It looked like it exploded out of the hand of Rodriguez. He overthrew everything. His catcher and the pitcher, who was backing up, and he did a great job coming through that, and just a cannon shot. Had the runner easily with an accurate throw. And some of those little things, but you do see the tools of what a powerful arm that Rodriguez does have. Wishes that one was a little bit more accurate because he was dead to rights.
So it's an RBI single for Mason Williams. That was his first at bat as he took over for James Ramsey. An RBI single, and he moves to second base on the throw, and that'll bring in Brian Goodwin, who is, it doesn't matter at the moment, but has moved from center field to now left field as Williams took over in center. that one is inside. So now a 6-1 ball game as you take another look at this throw from Yorman Rodriguez.
Well, it's not like it's from deep right field, but it's just coming in on such a trajectory or line that you can just really see that this guy has incredible arm strength.
This one is hit in the air center field. And there to make the catch is Byron Buxton, but the first run of the night comes across for the East. Still work to do, though, as we stretch here in Surprise. 6-1 the score. Paul Severino and Joe McGrain back with you here in Surprise, Arizona, the Fall Stars game. You go back to the third inning. Byron Buxton right through the wickets of Chris Bryant led to the game's first run. Corey Seager then drove home another on the fielder's choice as that scored Buxton. Brett Nicholas with the solo home run. And they would tack on 2 more with this home run. Stephen Romero's first at bat of the night. Alberto Almora just runs out of room in right field. So a 6-0 lead at that point. Now a 6-1 score as we head to the bottom half of the 7th inning. A good look at Stephen Romero. So he sat on the bench for the first half of the ball game. Comes in and then he knocks a 2-run shot to make it a 6-0 lead. But again now 6-1 as the East will go back to the bullpen as they have done each inning. And it's going to be Jeurys Familia from the New York Mets organization to come in and work here in the 7th and try to keep it at a 6-1 score. See a 2.75 ERA, and he saw a little bit of time in the major leagues as well. One of a handful of guys that have had some major league experience under their belts in 2013. Familia, one of those guys.
To get that walk total down and get that whip a little more under control.
Good crowd here tonight and a nice night too. We've been out here the last few years here on MLB Network to cover these games. Usually there's a little bit of a chill in the air out here in the desert, but tonight not so much.
No, does not ask for any better.
Cotton Eye Joe playing as well, so
it's a real toe tap ball. A ballpark favorite.
It certainly is. And a 6-1 lead as we move to the bottom half of the 7th inning here in Surprise. But first, we got to tell you, this copyrighted telecast is presented by authority of the Office of the Commissioner of Baseball and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form, and the accounts and descriptions of this game may not be disseminated without express written consent. So we move along here to the bottom half of the 7th, and the first time that we'll see Wayne Semien as he took over for Corey Seager earlier in this ball game. Another one of those guys, as Familia and Semien both saw some time in the big leagues in 2013. Marcus Semien. You may have said Wayne Semien. Have to find out who that guy is. Sounds familiar. Marcus. Marcus taps it back to the mound. Familia. Oh, got him by a step.
Familia showing a great deal of patience there.
Yeah.
You talk about infielders having that inner clock in your head, but I think Familia wishes that he would have got rid of that a little sooner. Kind of up the line a little bit, and that's always unnerving for a first baseman, thinking he's about to get his wrist or arm taken off by the runner. Anxious moment there for C.J. Cron.
And we've seen that Brian Roberts comes to mind. One of those guys who has to cover first base and gets his arm caught in between the ball and the runner and gets hurt. But luckily for C.J. Cron, not the case. I know you were wondering, as were the folks at home wondering what I'm talking about, but Wayne Semien from the NBA. Yes.
Well, thanks for finishing the sentence.
Well, if I'm going to make myself look like a fool, I may as well correct myself as well.
I'm just glad to know it was a real person.
So was I. Jorge Alfaro will step in. It'll be his first at bat. He took over for Austin Hedges on the defensive side of things a couple of innings ago.
New York Mets have started to do a much better job the last couple of years developing players out of their organization.
Alfaro is retired. Alfaro, the #1 prospect in the Texas Rangers organization, but a quick out here for out number 2 in the bottom half of the 7th. Yeah, obviously Matt Harvey would top that list of young pitchers that the New York Mets have drafted and developed.
Just had the Tommy John. Unfortunately, he's going to miss all of next year.
Here's Brett Nicholas, who homered in his second at bat, singled in his first at bat. They actually found a way to retire him in his third, so he's 2 for 3. So in the bottom of the 7th inning, Brett Nicholas part of the reason why the West has a 6-1 edge. This one's hit in the air, right field. Going back again is Almora, and looking up again for another home run for Brett Nicholas. His second home run of the ball game makes it a 7-1 lead for the West.
Just putting a nice easy swing on it, and it's up and away again. Just that beautiful classic left-handed hitter's swing. Watch a nice little, just a little hitch of the hands, and boom. Elegant swing.
He had 21 home runs in the regular season with Double-A, and he's added 2 more tonight to open up a 6-run cushion yet again, and very similar to his first home run back in the 4th. Eddie Rosario ahead in the count, 1 ball and no strikes with 2 outs here in the bottom half of the 7th. That one's in there for a called strike.
Well, he's making it look easy.
That's all they needed was more pop at first base. The last few years they've had a few go through there at first base. Mitch Moreland, Chris Davis, of course, who's obviously had himself a very good season, will be an MVP consideration for sure when those awards are announced on MLB Network in the coming weeks.
Well, and you were just talking about the #1 prospect with the Rangers, and they've had a great farm system for the last handful of years. And Elvis Andrus coming up. Everyone talking about Jurickson Profar after him. And
Crone with a nice play down the line to retire Rosario, but another run comes home as Brett Nicholas has connected on his second homer of the night, and it's back to a 6-run lead for the West. MLB Network's got the offseason covered. Wake up to the morning buzz on Hot Stove, then watch Intentional Talk, Clubhouse Confidential, and MLB Tonight in prime time. Track all the action all offseason long, weeknights on MLB Network. Back here in Surprise, Arizona, Paul Severino and Joe McGrain, the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game, and it's a 7-1 lead for the West as they turn to a new pitcher, Yimi Garcia, 49 games and a 2.54 ERA with Double-A Chattanooga in 2013. Like that whip too, well below 1, 0.8.
well, it's always nice coming out of the bullpen knowing that one, the difficult challenge of having to immediately throw strikes, and those guys that do get a lot of work.
And he'll face the heart of the East order, but the East is down by 6 runs here in the 8th. Chris Bryant takes outside. Bryant 0 for 3. Also had an error that led to a run, so for all the talk, and as we have mentioned before, it's all well-deserved hype. He has obviously not had the greatest of nights, as this is a broken bat, I think, knocked into center field. So take that, Paul Severino. It's a base hit. He's 1 for 4.
Yeah, that's what I call a strong man's hit. He's got the big swing, and of course 6'5", 215 pounds. Outfielders have to play a little deeper. There's Byron Buxton to respect that power, and it's up the trademark and falling in front of Buxton, and enough strength to muscle it out of the infield and turn a good pitcher's pitch into a base hit.
So he gets the knockoff Yimi Garcia, the number 12 prospect in the Dodgers organization. And this is C.J. Cron, line drive right to Buxton. Had to move back maybe a step to make the catch, and there's one away.
Well, you may think that he didn't really move and really just a half step, but to be able to read a ball that's hit that hard and to not panic and to know exactly and have a feel for what the ball was doing shows you some of those center field instincts, because that's one of the tougher plays, is the one that's scalded and hit right at you, and he made it look very easy. You would think that a ball hit right at you where you don't have to move is an easy play. It's not always the case.
Hear that all the time, especially about center fielders.
Yeah. And the other thing that can be the dynamic is, yeah, it is, it's hit hard, it's hit right at you, and it's knuckling, so it's not, you're not really getting a true flight of the baseball either.
Devin Travis takes a strike, and the count now 1 ball and 2 strikes. Travis has 1 at bat tonight, 0 for 1. Popped out to second base, lines that one foul. Count remains 1 ball and 2 strikes.
Excuse me, Paulie, I was just going to say we talked about Byron Buxton right off the top, and just seen so many of the little things, what I would call the aptitude and baseball player type things that he already possesses, and that part of it's been fun to watch.
He'll be tested again as Travis hits it high in the air, deep right center field, and it's going to be over the head of Buxton and off the base of the wall. Bryant around third. He's going to come in to score, and Travis into third with a 1-out triple, and it's now a 7-2 ball game. That ball was hit hard and a little bit to the left of Buxton, and enough to hit the base of the wall. So Travis, that offensive-minded second baseman we were talking about before, comes through with the ribby triple.
Yeah, we talked about it, that diminutive in size, but deceptive with the pop. Extra bases, 3 of them that is, to the deepest part of the park.
Another look here at Kyle Parker, who struck out in his first at bat of the night. Swings through that one, and it's 0-1. Travis is a guy who just obviously drove in the run, 16 homers and 76 RBIs to go along with 22 stolen bases in the regular season in the minor leagues. But still a 5-run cushion with 5 offensive outs left for the East as Parker swings through another one. 0-2. Popped up, foul ground, right side. Coming in is Nicholas, and he makes the catch for out number 2.
First baseman has to take charge on that play, and obviously his glove is much better designed for catching those foul pops than the catcher, who was in hot pursuit of it as well, and saying, hey, you go ahead and take it.
Better angle too, right?
Absolutely.
So we get another look at Albert Almora, who flew out to right field in his first at bat and in his second at bat. That's out number 3, but a run comes home thanks to a Devin Travis RBI triple. But the East running out of time, down 5 runs going to the home half of the 8th. Welcome back to Surprise Arizona. Paul Severino and Joe McGrain here as the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game continues. It's a 7-2 lead for the West as we go to the home half of the 8th inning. And part of the reason, a big reason as to why the West has a 7-2 lead, is our guest right now, Brett Nicholas, joining us from the dugout. Brett, thanks a lot for taking some time.
No problem.
So this is nice, an all-star game in front of the home crowd. A nice night so far with a couple of home runs.
Yeah, it's been quite a pleasure. It's nice playing I got a bunch of family and friends out here, and it's just a great experience, and I'm loving every second of it.
Brett, just watching your swing tonight, it looks like a pretty direct route to the ball. Obviously, it's produced a couple of bombs, and admiration, of course, from from your teammates, and is that something that you've really worked on and is trying to tighten up that hack a little bit, because it looks good tonight?
Yeah, just trying to mainly stay left center approach, and I've got kind of lucky with the ball's middle end, but just trying to stay left center approach and keep it as short as possible. I mean, these guys have incredible stuff out here, and if you have any extra movement, you're in trouble. So that's been the focus this fall league is just trying to be as short as possible to the ball.
Yeah, and do you think that that's really helped kind of speed up your development, seeming that that every guy that's out there is throwing around 95?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, every guy's got incredible stuff. So it's you must do it, otherwise you're going to be in trouble.
All right, Brett Nicholas, we appreciate it. Go shampoo your hair a little bit. Get that stuff out of there. We
Baby
appreciate
powder.
the time. Keep it up.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you again soon. So we move now to the you ball players. Always goofing around.
The tomfoolery and the hijinks. It used to be the hot foot, lighting the shoelaces on fire, and that has gone towards more safety conscious things like shaving cream and baby powder.
Right, absolutely. This one's hit in the air, and we may have to talk to Stephen Romero too, because he also has 2 home runs. That's a solo shot, and every time, there's only been twice, but whenever the East scores a run, the West answers right back.
Yes, they do, and 2 opposite barrel bombs there for Romero.
Wow. So Romero with 2 home runs, Brett Nicholas with 2 home runs, and an 8-2 lead for the West.
Did we interview the wrong guy, or too soon?
Maybe too soon. There's going to be some competition for that game MVP coming up later.
Jumping on that high hanging slider and in a real good position to hit, Miguel Cabrera style, who has, I don't think anyone has better opposite field power than Miggy does these days, and he's shown it tonight. Mr. Romero with 2 home runs to right center.
2 for 2 with the 2 home runs. As Naquin takes low, and it's 2 balls and no strikes. Naquin has a triple and a run scored to go along with a walk and 2 strikeouts, so he's 1 for 3. This one hit fair down the first base line. C.J. Cron will make the play all by himself, 3 unassisted, and there's 1 away.
That's where you get the admiration from your peers, your teammates, when you hit those home runs the opposite way, because it is not an easy thing to do. Obviously, most of your leverage is in the pull side of the field, but to be strong enough to hit the ball out the other way, it takes a lot of things to be well timed. Using your fanny and your legs and hitting from the ground up, which is, I think, why we saw Miguel Cabrera losing some of his power in the last few weeks of the season and into the postseason, is because of the groin injury, and the lower half just didn't have the foundation underneath him. But to coordinate that like Romero has been able to do tonight, it's been fun to watch.
Speaking of Miguel Cabrera, his fellow member of the Tigers organization, Corey Knebel, pitching, and we were a little late on the introduction of the pitcher because we were talking with Brett Nicholas and his 2 home runs, and then quickly Stephen Romero hit his 2nd home run, but Corey Knebel is in, and he's got a 3-1 count now to Byron Buxton.
I was watching Buxton hit batting practice as we look at the scouting report on Knebel, another guy in the mid-90s, but Buxton with a Greyhound lean type build. You think he's going to fill out a little bit more, which is another reason why you already see the upside, and I think upside that's going to even improve and continue to get better.
And earlier we talked about how the catcher was kind of the fast track to the major leagues.
Right.
It seems as though these days now it's more so the power arm out of the bullpen, and Knebel has had himself a terrific 2013, an 0.87 ERA and 15 saves, but he gives up the home run, gets a couple of outs, and the skipper will go to the pen. So with an 8-2 ball game here in the bottom of the 8th, we'll take a quick break here on MLB Network. Welcome back. That's a happy guy. Believe me, the World Series trophy back in Boston for the 8th time, 3rd time in 10 years. Get your authentic World Series championship merchandise, including caps, t-shirts, jerseys, sweatshirts, memorabilia, and more at redsox.com. So it's 8-2 here in the bottom of the 8th inning. The home run, the storyline here for the West, as they've got 4 home runs tonight, but only by 2 guys. 2 home runs for Brett Nicholas, 2 home runs for Stephen Romero as well. So that's where we stand here. Bottom half of the 8-2, West on top, as Jake Barrett comes in out of the bullpen to relieve Corey Knebel here with 2 outs in the 8th. It wasn't a necessity for the managers to get all the pitchers in. They would have liked to do that, but obviously with the chance that this game goes extra innings, even though the Robinson rule would be in effect and no game goes longer than 11. Now with a 6-run cushion and only 3 offensive outs to try to get those 6 runs back. Looks as though Bill Richardson has decided to go to the pen, maybe get some guys a little more exposure. As Barrett with the strikeout here, or with the strike rather, to Garen Cicchini. Pretty good ERA in 52 games at a couple of levels of the minor leagues in the Diamondbacks organization. That one's hit in the air, deep right center field, and up onto the hill. A home run for Garen Cicchini, and it's a 9-2 lead.
Somebody just moved the fences in a couple innings ago on the slide.
It seems like it. Just got done talking about the Red Sox winning the World Series. We talked about it before with the depth of their farm system, and here you go. Garen Cicchini with a home run to deep right center field. High chopper to Bryant over at third, in the dirt, and it gets by Cron and into foul ground. And into second goes Yorman Rodriguez.
Well, that's something we talked about earlier, Paul, about the arm strength of Bryant. And I guess a little hurried with the speed of Rodriguez. And just everything was just out of sorts with his rhythm and footwork over at third. There's a better look at it here. And that one is way off the charts.
Second error on the night for Chris Bryant. One ball went through his legs. That one he spiked it over to first. So with 2 outs, that brings up Marcus Semien. And he takes outside for a ball, 1-0. Semien's second at bat, tapped back to the mound in his first plate appearance tonight. So Jake Barrett, the number 7 prospect in the Arizona Diamondbacks system, drafted by Toronto in 2009, but he chose Arizona State instead. Drafted again in the 3rd round in 2012 by the Diamondbacks.
Has kind of that Jonathan Broxton type build.
I was thinking more J.J. Puss.
All right, that would work too, and even more symmetry since he is with the Diamondbacks.
Maybe it was the uniform.
Yeah.
And he gets the strikeout nonetheless for out number 3. But a couple more runs come in, a couple more home runs. One for Stephen Romero, one for Garen Cicchini. And it is a 9-2 ball game heading to the 9th. Welcome back to Surprise Stadium in Surprise, Arizona. Paul Severino and Joe Magrane, the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game presented by Bowman Baseball Cards as we move to the 9th inning. And a new pitcher is on the hill for the West as they look to hold on to this 9-2 lead and win this ball game. And they turn to David Goforth in the 9th. 34 games, 18 starts, a 3.17 ERA, and also 5 saves. Member of the Milwaukee Brewers organization, saw a couple of levels of the minor leagues in 2013. Trying to get the last 3 outs here tonight in the Fall Stars game.
Another hard thrower, and you know, it's kind of caught in between about who this benefits more. Are these pitchers out here with the tremendous arm strength, or the hitters? And we talked with Brent Nicholas, who already has 2 home runs in this game, and I thought brought up an interesting point about how, you know, these hitters really have to shorten up their swings. And when you think of a guy coming out of the bullpen and a cutter is his go-to pitch, can't help but think about the great Mariano Rivera, who pretty much defined the cut fastball by which all others are judged.
But some people are say that some guys maybe the cutter's not a great pitch unless it's a dominant pitch like a Mariano Rivera or a Kenley Jansen.
Well, sometimes it's also a by the way happening where it's not so much the grip and you're deliberately cutting it. Your arm just naturally kind of pronates that way in that delivery, and I think it is more so the case there with Mariano in that situation, that he was not really doing a lot to manipulate the ball to where it's a couple miles an hour, slower than what a normal fastball would be. I mean, he was getting maximum velocity also with the cut as well, and that late cutting action, which made it so dominant and made it him a one-pitch pitcher.
And he was pretty good.
A one-pitch pitcher, first ballot Hall of Famer, yes.
Yeah. Obviously retiring after this season that just ended, and looked like he may have still had something left in the tank.
Oh, I think he easily had another year left.
Nieto back to Goforth, who will take it himself. The old one unassisted. We made it. We can get to write that one down. One out here in the ninth. And now the number 9 hitter in the order, Alan Hansen, will step in. A very good crowd on hand tonight. In fact, a Fall Stars game record. 6,529 fans on hand to see some of the best and brightest prospects in minor league baseball go at it. It's been all West, as you can see, with a 9-2 lead here in the top half of the ninth inning. And the East side down to their last 2 outs. Goforth, the number 17 prospect in the Brewers system, according to MLB.com. Drafted by Cleveland in 2010, drafted by Milwaukee in 2011. Moved up a couple of rounds to the 7th round.
And normally you don't see guys with this type of arm strength go all the way down to the 7th round.
That's a chopper. 4 out number 2. And Hansen is retired, and it's going to be Mason Williams, the last hope here for the East squad here in the ninth. However, there's going to be a pitching change. Again, we will be here for a good chunk of time over the next few weeks here on MLB Network. Tuesday, 9 Eastern Time, Mesa against Salt River. Wednesday, Salt River and Scottsdale, those same 2 teams on Thursday. Friday, we head back to Scottsdale to check out the Glendale Desert Dogs against the Scottsdale Scorpions. Next Saturday, military appreciation game, Peoria Javelinas against the Salt River Raptors. And then we are back for the Arizona Fall League Championship game in a couple of weeks. So Goforth is out as they go to the bullpen with 2 outs in the ninth. We're back right after this. Back here at Surprise Stadium in Surprise, Arizona, the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game in the top of the ninth inning with 2 away. Take a look at some of the guys that have spent some time here in the Arizona Fall League that helped these 2 teams, the Red Sox and the Cardinals, win their respective pennants, and obviously the guys on the left side of the screen that helped the Boston Red Sox win the 2013 World Series Championship. So as we've been telling you throughout the night, there's a good chance that some, if not a lot, of the names and players that we see here tonight will be at the big league level sooner rather than later and help out their squads at the big league level. Same can be said for Jonas Dufek, who pitched in 50 games this season in the minor leagues. Mason Williams is not retired, as it's in and out of the glove of Yorman Rodriguez. And just when you thought it was over, Mason Williams into second base with what's going to be ruled, at least at the moment, as a double.
Well, that's the type of ball flight that I was talking about earlier. You could see Rodriguez battling with it, not true flight as it was coming towards him. He's running on his heels a little bit, and when that happens, your eyes tend to bounce up and down a little, and you don't track it as well as you should. Looked like it may have been knuckling a bit.
So Williams hustling out of the box, and he moves into second base on the double. So now it's up to Brian Goodwin, who's been in this ball game all night long. He's had himself 4 at-bats. 1 for 4, single back in the first, and was caught stealing by Austin Hedges. Started the game in center field, but moved over to left when that guy number 22 came into the ball game to play center. Swing and a miss for Goodwin. So for Dufek, he was drafted in the 9th round in 2011 out of Creighton by the Houston Astros, a team that again, as we're here throughout the week, and we'll be joined by John Manuel of Baseball America, we could talk about the strength of different farm systems, but it seems like the Houston Astros are beginning, and it's no secret to anybody, beginning what could be something of a lengthy rebuild down in Houston.
You know, we were talking about earlier the strength of the St. Louis Cardinals organization. Jeff Luhnow, the current general manager with the Houston Astros.
That one is caught on the foul line, and that'll do it. So Marcus Semien puts it away, and the West wins this one 9-2, your final score. So a good win by the West, pounding out 5 home runs, 2 of which by Brett Nicholas, 2 for Stephen Romero, and on to a 9-2 victory tonight. So give me some thoughts.
Very impressive. Saw a lot of things, even though the score didn't indicate it. A lot of big-time power arms from the hill, and Byron Buxton came as advertised. Really like what he was able to do, and never more so than Brett Nicholas and Romero, each hitting 2 home runs.
And that's actually something that we have not seen yet in the 8 times that we've seen one of these Fall Stars games. Is a guy hit 2 home runs in a Fall Stars game. So Brett Nicholas is your game MVP on the strength of those 2 home runs. His second one coming in the 7th inning. A Phoenix native. Said he had some family and friends in-house and was able to treat them to a good show. Also, as a member of the Texas Rangers organization, calls this his home ballpark in the Arizona Fall League. So, as I said before, he became the first player to homer twice in a Fall Stars game, and his teammate tonight became the second. Stephen Romero with a couple of home runs as well. For Nicholas, a home run in the 4th, a home run in the 7th, and he is your most valuable player, presented by Bowman Baseball Cards. Put on a nice show for the family and the friends. That's nice.
Most definitely, and I thought we getting a chance to interview him. He's receiving the most valuable player of the game award, and rightly so. About facing all these guys throwing 95 miles an hour has forced him to make some changes, tighten up that swing, and the results were outstanding.
Certainly was. He's getting interviewed right now by Jonathan Mayo and many others. So again, we will be here. MLB Network will be here for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be here all week long, starting Tuesday night, as we bounce around the Arizona Fall League. The West Fall Stars win it 9-2 tonight. And again, coming up next, we take you back to the 2013 American League Championship Series for Joe Magrane and everybody down in the truck, everybody up here helping us out in the booth. I'm Paul Severino. Thank you very much. Oh, Brett Nicholas, your game MVP. Get a little baby powder. 9-2 the final score.